All right. I see our equalizer working, and there's a little bit of a delay, so say hello, everybody. And then we ask if they can hear me, and then you can say hello, children, and we can see if they can hear you.
Oh, I need to turn this down so I don't get too loud. But
Oh, they hear us. The people hear us.
perfect.
So what does the video title say, guys? Because I changed it 3 times because Chris got all of his flights canceled. And he is currently in airport hell right now. I feel bad for him. And I looked on my Facebook Messenger real quick, and I saw Mike Page and you were online. And I was like, Mike, what are you doing? And he didn't get back to me. And I'm like, Dario, what are you doing? And you're like, I'm like, can you do a radio show in 20 minutes? And you're like, yeah. I was blown away. Because Mike's like, I'm in the middle of 3 things. I can't do anything.
Yeah, it doesn't happen that often, but today you just caught me on a good day, so I'm glad it all worked out. Because most days, like, I have no free time. I usually catch the last hour of the show because I usually, by the time I dyno and get home at the end of the day, it's 9 o'clock my time, and it's midnight or later your time, right? So
Yeah. Well, everybody can hear you, so we'll go over the, well, thanks for filling in last minute, and thanks for coming on regardless. And
no
then
worries.
we'll introduce you. Do you say, is it Dario?
Dario or Dario, it's all how you say Super Mario Brothers or Super Mario
Oh,
Brothers.
okay, so it's
Same
neither
thing.
way's wrong.
Neither way is wrong, but I don't really
Tomato,
care.
tomato.
Yeah, I answered pretty much.
And then you own Infamous Automotive or Infamous
Yeah,
Racecraft?
same thing.
Same thing.
Depends on the day. But
And you are in America's Hat somewhere.
Canada. Yeah. Yeah. We call it Midwest, but I think in the US we're so far west that we would just be west.
Oh.
So
What are you above?
Montana.
Yeah, that's
So
pretty
it's
far.
Calgary, Alberta. So like a big place near us is Banff, Alberta, where it's in the Rocky Mountains. It's a really big first place. Uh, Nothing really else. A whole lot of nothing for the amount of people that live there.
And then, well, I guess we'll start with. So, what do you do now? What's your main job, and what do you do with cars?
Right now, I'm pretty much in the last year and a half, 2 years, I've been tuning more than anything. I started the shop about 7, 8 years ago, doing LS swaps, and I used to build a lot of low budget stuff. I still do, and then I kind of just jumped into doing LS swaps for myself, and then doing them for other people, and then now I bought a dyno off of my buddy Tomo like 2 years ago because he used to do all my tuning. We used to share a shop, and then he kind of slowed down a bit. So I bought his dyno, and now I've kind of jumped into the whole tuning LS's dyno thing, and plus a bunch of standalone tuning. I'm kind of a jack of all trades, master of none.
So, building, tuning, all of the
Yeah,
above. Racing, you
yeah,
drive cars too.
yeah. I have a Chevette twin turbo stock bottom end LS with twin Borg Warner S369s at the time. It's gone 8.1 at 170 in the quarter and 5.0 at 140 in the 8. It's about 2,700
That's got to
pounds.
be scary. Short ass
It is.
wheelbase.
It is. It is. It is. And then I have a all-wheel drive Civic with a K24 in it. And just me and my son have been putting that. I have a 14-year-old son that's getting into cars, and we've been putting that together the last couple of year and a half. Things have got slowed down because of COVID and stuff. But that, and then I have a Austin Mini burnout car that runs on methanol. It's got a LS and a 4.8 LS. It's been converted to rear-wheel drive. We took it to LS Fest 2 years ago, and it was pretty much just something to go out and have fun and do burnouts and kind of.
It looks super cool too.
Yeah, it looks cool. It looks cool, and it does big burnouts, and it's loud, and that's kind of all it was ever designed for. It's not meant to handle. It's not meant to It's meant to kill tires as fast as humanly possible.
Oh yeah, people were saying they can hear like a fan. I can hear it too. I don't know if there is anything.
Okay, that's maybe the fan on my computer.
Oh,
Oh, so maybe I should switch back to my other headphones. Give me 10 seconds here.
okay. Just like the laptop or something is that loud, guys. I'm surprised he could come on last minute. He said actually this is like the one day in the last 30 days he doesn't have anything on the dyno tonight. So, lucky us.
Maybe that'll be better.
It might be. You might have to change your microphone source and like the if you click the dotted thing, the three dots and it says more options. You go to settings. You should be able to choose the microphone as like the headset instead of maybe the laptop.
Maybe settings. There we go.
Oh, now we can't hear you. We're working on it.
I'm guessing the internal one on these headphones don't work. Let me just give me 1 second again here.
Okay.
This is what happens when you throw it together in 15
No problem.
minutes.
We'll see if we can get it quieter. I know what you mean, guys. It's like sounds like a vacuum cleaner. It'd be cool to just hear him normally. Hot water burn, baby. Dude, is that a Saturday Night Live skit? I think that is. That's an old one. What did you say the other one was, Mike? I actually knew what it was. I watched Saturday Night Live when I was like 6, so I know all the episodes almost.
Stole these from my kid.
Nice. Now you'll have to change the mic again.
Yeah.
And probably to your headset. The headset might swap automatically, but... Can't hear you now. Is there a mute on the headset? Heard something. Not yet. You could try disconnecting and reconnecting too. Nothing yet. No, sorry.
I don't know what's going on, but the fan shut off.
Okay.
So
yeah,
I think we got that covered.
Okay. Yeah,
I'll just leave these on.
We'll deal with it.
We'll just keep going.
Yep. All right. Well, we went over your shop and cars quick. I guess we normally ask like what people did before they got into cars or running a shop.
In Canada, we have like an apprenticeship system for automotive, and pretty much other than doing it on the side, I've been a journeyman automotive tech. I was focused on drivability and diagnostics. So that's what I did for probably the previous, since I was 16 years old, I was apprentice. So that's what I pretty much did. I've done cars all my life. The only other job I've ever had is I worked at McDonald's when I was 15, but I've pretty much been some form of automotive the whole time. I took a break for a few years and I built lowriders and mini trucks and that kind of fabrication for a few years. I owned a different shop when I was in my early 20s, but I always got drawn back to the performance side of the business because it just seems like you get the most repeat customers with race cars because people get hooked. They want to go faster. And whereas like you build hot rods or you build lowriders or custom vehicles, and once it's done, it's done. You never really see, other than minor things, you never really see those people ever again. So I kind of always jumped back to the automotive thing, whether I was working out of my house or I was working at a shop or.
Huh. And then I know the other one is we always ask people like what their first car was.
Mine was technically when I was 12 years old, my mom bought me a 79 Ford Pinto for $50. It was yellow with a vinyl roof.
That's
and
incredible.
Literally, yeah, it was the summer between grade 7 and grade 8 in school. And she bought it for me, but it didn't run because she wouldn't give me a battery because she knew I'd be joyriding it everywhere. And all I did the whole summer is just take it apart and put it back together, take it apart and put it back together, learn the ins and outs of stuff. And still remember like breaking ball joints loose and almost losing my head with coil springs and stuff like that. But it was awesome. Like my mom just knew I had the mechanical intuition, so she kind of just guided me that way. So that was the first vehicle I actually owned. And then the first vehicle I actually drove is I have a 1984 Ford Ranger. It's body dropped. It's on hydraulics. It lays right on the ground. It has a 302 in it. And that was pretty much my learning thing for most of my teenage years. I drove it. It ate the ring gear on the 2.3 that it had, 2.3 Ford that it had. And then somehow at 16 years old, I convinced my mom to put a 302 in it. And so I said, this will be cheaper than fixing the ring gear. So I learned I did my first V8 swap when I was 16 years old, and I actually made it run, which is amazing because I don't think at 16-year-old much kids can do anything anymore, but
They can work a phone.
yeah, yeah. But
That's awesome. The Pinto. I'm sure if you still had that, Tony Reiners would pay you for it.
I don't have that one, but I have my orange one still that had the 2.3 that ran 9s. So that's one of our projects actually for this winter. I haven't really mentioned much about it, but we're doing a K24 in the Pinto rear-wheel drive. I bought this adapter to run a power glide, and that's what we're gonna do. So
that's awesome. You make the all-wheel drive Volkswagen truck idea look dumb with all that.
That's super cool.
We already got a turbo for it. I got it today.
Nice.
I figured what the hell. I looked up turbo kits, and it was like $330 for a turbo, manifold, wastegate, and hardware. And I was like, whatever. Like, we're only going to build one exhaust for this thing, so if all that stuff breaks, whatever.
The manifolds are ridiculous. Those logs are like $60 on eBay.
This is actually a stainless tubular.
Oh, is it? Ooh, crazy.
Oh, wow. Because the logs don't come with the kit. This is the whole kit. I was like, what? Yeah. Why not? And then the accident this element got into, the intake manifold was cracked, so I got $100 race intake also.
Yeah, it's K stuff is so cheap, it's ridiculous. My Pinto had like all kinds of one-off stuff, and then I got into this. It was like if it broke, you weren't getting another one, and now you go on eBay and it's just flooded with all the K swaps, knockoff of a knockoff of a knockoff, and it's like $100 for a skunk tube knockoff manifold. I just actually bought one for this Pinto project so I can cut it up because it's way easier to weld on new Chinese aluminum than it is to weld on old greasy Honda stuff. So
yeah, I was like, well, we're definitely turboing it. There's not much room for an intercooler, but because the bumpers, like it's not even a subframe or anything. Like the Volkswagen stuff is just cavernous stamped steel.
Yeah.
So I mean, there was room for the motor anyway, but I started cutting a lot just so there's more room. And also it is a Coke can, so I was going to plate where the engine mounts are going and plate more of the frame because you could put a pry bar in and just pry the front frame away.
Oh yeah.
So
if it still has front frame rails, you're doing pretty good on those Volkswagens.
It does. Those pockets near the inside fenders and doors are rotted, but one of our friends is gonna, once I get the engine mounted and everything half decent, I'm gonna pull it back out and he's gonna paint and fix all the rust because I don't want to do it. He's better at it. It's his job to fix rust and paint. So
I'm sure you get a lot of that out there.
Yeah, Northeast salt. It
Yeah,
is like the salt capital of the world out here.
yeah. Oh,
That's why our LS engines don't cost anything. The trucks die in 5 years; they're dead.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
if they don't die, the brake lines rot, and then people crash them into something. So the engine and everything's fine.
yeah. I grew up on the coast in BC, so I like out there we have the similar issues where people put back their boats into the ocean and then back the half of their truck in it at the same time. So you get a lot of that stuff. I dealt with a lot of rust, but where I'm at now, we have a lot of LS stuff because it's all oil and gas, right? So all these trucks are leased. Once they're done their lease, they go straight to the junkyard. Nobody runs them out. And most of the time you go to the junkyard and you look at this truck and you're like, why is it even here? It's a 10-year-old GM, and it's just there because it has no monetary value to these companies. So they just donate it to the Kidney Foundation, and it ends up at pick and pull, right? So
Crazy. Well, what did I ask about? What did you? Man, where was I? We're so far off in some strange land. I'll grab some questions here real quick.
sure.
What's the worst car that you still love?
Man, there's a lot of them. My Pinto has been a love-hate relationship. I had a pretty crazy built 2.3 Ford turbo motor in it, and it ended up running nines, but it was a $10,000 temperamental piece of shit. Like, it would break constantly, and it was expensive when it broke, and I hated it, but I loved the car, so I just kept shoveling the money at it. But then I finally got into the LS stuff more and more once I got my Chevette finished, and I realized how cheap the LS stuff was and how little maintenance there was. So I ended up just, I knew I wanted to keep the car because I wouldn't find another 71 Pinto, but I sold all the 2.3 stuff, and I was just like, either I'm going to put an LS in this thing one day or something else cool will come along in the meantime. And then I just put it to the side. But now it's going to be back. Hopefully next year we'll get it out and run some eights with it.
Potato R33 is in early, asking all the good questions. You can always count on him, and he's here early. He always asks some ridiculous ones, which is fun, and then he also asks some good ones. What's your favorite rapid deconstruction tool? That's a good question, honestly.
I can use a Sawzall like a laser. Like I'm like an artist with a Sawzall. Like, wherever you have to cut something, Diablo blades and a Milwaukee Sawzall, and like I can cut straight lines, I could cut signatures, I could do anything. Like, that's my favorite tool for wrecking shit.
It's like a jigsaw for you.
Oh, it's just crazy. Like, people watch me work and they think I'm nuts because, like, I'll be half an inch away from a gas tank cutting another piece of metal, and I won't hit the gas tank, and they're like, how do you do that? And I'm like, it's just practice.
Surgeon.
Yeah, I'm definitely a surgeon with a Sawzall, but that just takes years of wrecking stuff to all the times that I didn't do it right and punched a hole in something that wasn't supposed to.
What's the most impressive thing you've broken on a vehicle, and a thing that made you wonder how you even managed to break it?
I don't know. Like, sometimes I really try to break stuff just because for the learning experience. And then when I do break it, like, I broke the Civic really good this year. Like, I did 68 dyno pulls on a stock K24, and eventually it dropped the valve, but it destroyed literally everything. There was like, I couldn't save any. I think I saved the cams and the valve springs out of that motor. It wrecked the turbo, it wrecked, and I was just being stubborn. It was making 670 horsepower, and I was like, it's going to make 700.
Yeah.
So 70 dyno pulls later, I was like, and then it blew up, and I was like, man, I really should have looked at the data and said, hey, we should have stopped at 650. And because I was trying 2 degrees more or 2 degrees less or richer, leaner, or all these different things, when I should have just been looking at, if it would have been anybody else, I would have sent them home after 10 pulls and just been like, yeah, this is all you get. But it's just the challenge. That's one of the things I love about tuning is when it's something of your own and you're learning something new. I hadn't dealt with the Haltech in 10 years, and I was just kind of learning how the VVT worked and stuff, and how it reacted to what the RPM curve was and stuff like that. So I was wailing on it for no good reason, but when it did blow, it just wrecked everything. It just like there was chunks of piston in the intercooler, like it just went everywhere because I didn't stab the clutch as soon as it blew up, so it kind of decelled for about a good amount of time. So it kind of turned everything into a really good blender.
Yeah, I call it the red mist. Chasing the red mist. I've done it. I don't, obviously when it's someone else's car, same thing. I'm like, it ain't gonna do it as soon as the Delta falls. But same thing with mine. I'm like, not $699 today. No.
no. It's $699, but you might hit 700, but you were shooting for 750.
Yeah.
So yeah, that wrecked everything, and I just should have. I added up to 38 pounds of boost on the pretty much stock motor, and I was just like, yeah, it's gonna do it or it's gonna blow up. And when it blew up, it was good. It was like a mixture of like powdered aluminum and coolant and everything everywhere. I wish I would have got it on video, but.
Oh, I probably know the answer to this, but this is a good one. What's your proudest time slip and the story behind it?
Probably the proudest. I got a few of them, but going eights at 170 and the Chevette was one of the proudest ones I've done. Going 5.0 at 140 in the eighth was big. Like I was real. I don't give it as much appreciation as it was because I was shooting for a 499, but it was just everything worked that day, and it was like the only reason it didn't go 499 is because I had to pedal once. So on a pedal it went 5.0 at 140, wow. And it was just like it was so close, and everything worked, and the car felt good because that car. The thing with the Chevette is when it's good, it's really good. When it's bad, it's really bad. You're either completely in control, or what I consider completely in control, or you're completely out of control with the car. Like you're drifting sideways at 170 miles an hour, trying to reach the chute and stuff like that and stuff. But that's my big accomplishments with those cars. Stock bottom end, tuned by me 100%. It's kind of like the pivotal thing that I've done. And then I have a few friends' cars that I've been pretty proud of the stuff I've tuned. My buddy Ryan has a Vega with a Gen 1. I call it a Gen 1 LS, but it's a small block Chev. And it's gone eights with just a pretty simple setup on 20 pounds of boost. And
I was going to say your Chevette because I saw your posts about that thing just eating your lunch for a long time.
Yeah, well, that was struggle street with that car, and then we finally went to Holly, and then it kind of all turned around in 1 year. I went from like 850 at 158 to the first pass. I blew the tires off and just ran it out, and it went 170 miles an hour on the first pass, and then every pass after that it was 170 miles an hour, and I'm like, oh well, I'll take 2 degrees out just to see if it actually likes the 107 or it likes the timing. Took 2 degrees out, it went 168. So I'm like, yeah, we're putting those right back where it was. And I never really messed with it much more than that because it was scary as fuck at 170. So I was like, yeah, I don't really need to turn up the top end. I just started working on my short track, and I got it to go 119 60 foot on a ladder bar on a slick with no bead locks. And then when you start doing that, like the car will do 124 60 foots all day. And then once you start leaning on them on a good track day, you can get it shorter than that. But man, like getting it to leave, that's just like a culmination of all your skills. Cause like anybody can pull huge mile per hour in the top end. But like to get a car to leave and go that fast and react and not go on the back bumper and do all those things, it's like everything you've learned and more you need to know to make it do that. So
Yeah, that's what Mark just said. 119 in a Chevette. Though, what's the wheelbase? I think a golf cart's longer than the
It's like
Chevette.
90. It's like 94 or something. It's not really short. It's like the same as like a first gen RX-7, but it's it's uh it's narrow as shit. So the
That's
problem is when you go up to the line, if you ever see a video of my car going up to the line, there is no groove. So like if I line up like the left tires with the groove, the right tires are in the oil of everybody else's shit
oh
because the
yeah.
car is so narrow. So like whatever side I line up on, if I put both right tires in the groove and the left tires not, the car goes left because it steers on the grease. If I do it the other way, it steers towards the wall usually because I try to always go in the right lane. But so like I have to either get out when there's like nobody is gone yet when they first prep or something like that. Like it takes a perfect storm for that thing to get down the track and not be sketchy, right? So
Chris Ortiz says that's a nope from me. I want my shit long like a limo.
well, even like now that I have this all-wheel drive car, we've done a couple 150-mile-an-hour hits on the street, and it's like a walk in the park just because I'm used to this sketchy ass thing going down the track. Like I probably could drive a pro mod and it would feel like a walk in the park compared to this thing. I've been skating all my life with all these sketchy short wheelbase cars that I've had, but I always see the Aussies do it, so then I call myself out on it. I'm like, if they can run sixes with a 10-point and a little Holden Omni, which is pretty much or whatever they are with a short wheelbase, so I can do it too. And they usually do it with like a big ass 15-inch stock steering wheel on stock suspension. So
Yeah, they're wild. I love I was just saying to I just had Al on from the Skid Factory, and we were talking about RX3s, and I'm like, man, those are so cool. He's like a decent RX3's $100,000 car right now, and
yeah,
I'm like, oh, that's upsetting.
yeah. Those guys down there got crazy money, but they're also a lot more dedicated than most people, right? You'd have to be when you have such a small country, but you look at so much of the stuff that comes out of their own country. Like they make their own ECUs, they make their own dynos, they make their own blowers, they make so much stuff because it's just such a shit show to get anything
Yeah,
from
they're
the
in the middle of
US.
nowhere, so it's
Yeah, like they like all the Speedmaster Pro Comp Electronics, that's like their number one place that they send stuff to because they just circumvent the US. They just go straight from China to Australia. So one day I'll go there. They said,
I'm waiting for teleporters because that
yeah.
kind of flight is I'm gonna go
Yeah,
insane.
it's like 19 hours from Vancouver. It's like, I don't know if I could handle it, but
Nope,
a
nope.
couple of guys after Larry Chen posted my mini video, they're like, we'll make you an honorary Australian. I'd
That's
have to go for something like that, like Summer Nats or something, because I couldn't just go there and walk around. It'd have to be for some sort of event that I could experience, right? So,
Oh, someone asked. This is a good one. I remember. You probably. I think you still have it. They're asking. Can you elaborate on your turbo gas tow rig? Your dually has a turbo
yeah,
LS.
I ended up actually selling that to a guy this year just because I wanted to move on to other projects. But I was bagged. It was a 2007 Chev 2500. It had a LY6 in it with like the factory 50-pound injectors. It had a 7875. I built turbo crit kits for the 99 to 13 Chev trucks. And so it had that, and I converted it from a single wheel to a dually, and then I did a bunch of other stuff to it. But we did like a tow tune. It had the factory 6L80 or 6L90 or whatever in it, and I used it to tow all the time, and it was awesome. Like it got better gas mileage than it did when it was stock, and it could pull anything. It was a good compromise for a diesel. I figured, and it was cool, and it had semi wheels on it and stuff. So that part was cool, and I just liked it. And then my shop now is on a gravel road, and I didn't want to drive it every day on the gravel road. So I was like,
Mm.
it had no inner wheel tubs in the back because it was low. I just got lazy and never finished it. And then I get enticed by other projects. So it's like, oh, I'm sitting on this vehicle that I barely ever drive, but I could have the money that wouldn't come out of my pocket technically to go build something else. And so that's kind of what I do. And I just like pretty much just flush it down the toilet to the next project and do that. So
I like to do the same. Yeah.
yeah, it's just like I usually build it, make my point. It's cool. It's kind of rough around the edges like me. And then I move on to the next one. Like I'm a solid 80% person. I never get 100% and finish it all nice because then I'd have to be nice to it and shit. I'm just like, yeah, it's cool enough to 80%. It's 80% of the way, and it's cool enough for 80% of the population that doesn't know shit about cars and stuff. So I never really go all the way. Even my all-wheel drive car is a total piece of shit, but it looks cool when you're rolling down the road and it's fast. And I've always kind of been that way. I've never been a big paint guy and stuff. Like, it's cool to own that kind of stuff, but I'm not the person to own it.
Rusty Toon says, I remember you trying to hit the wall at 170, and we were all cringing while watching.
Yeah, my wife was pretty thrilled about that too because she was watching it. But my my Pinto used to be pretty sketchy too. Like our local track that shut down about 10 years ago, it was never prepped. So like it would skate all over, and people said it looked like ice capades going down the track when I'd go down and stuff. So I've always gotten kind of used to it. So my out of control and someone else's out of control are a lot different than most people. But I usually try to, when I'm trying new things, especially quarter mile stuff, I try to do single lane passes because I really don't want to be in front or behind of anybody when I'm doing stupid shit. So
that's a lot of times. Also, to relax and foot brake the car, I let people go.
Yeah. Like when I do that too, but the other thing you don't want to do is run into the back
Freight
of them.
train them. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, like that's the thing. It's like I either want to be way the hell in front of the person or way the hell behind the person because neither is good if you're going to be crashing into somebody at 170 miles an hour, right?
But what's your preferred way of adding lightness?
Start with something light. That's my
That's
biggest
solid advice.
The biggest thing. I've been involved with like a lot of drag radial cars, and I've built a lot of cars and stuff like that. And the easiest way to make something light is start with something light in the first place. Everything I build is like crazy. I start with the lightest thing I can possibly start. Like the Chevette was 2,000 pounds when it was completely stock, and now it's about 2,300 with the air-to-water intercooler. My all-wheel drive car is like 2,300 pounds. The Pinto is 2,300 pounds. And I just start with something crazy light because it's always going to be cheaper to have something that's already light because you don't have to buy light shit for it.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's just easier on parts. Like it's easy to go fast when you have a 2,000 pound car that makes 500 horsepower and a 4,000 pound car that makes 500 horsepower. It's just so much easier on parts. Like even though you're going to go way faster with a 2,000 pound car, the parts aren't going to wear out as hard because it's not having to push all that weight. Like I built the propane turbo truck too, and that was 4,600 pounds, and that was my one experience in building something heavy. And I kind of learned that I didn't really want to do that again. It was a cool, fun truck, and I learned about propane and that stuff, but it was not a good way to go fast.
That was the first time I saw your stuff. How long ago was that?
I think I'd have to look at my YouTube, but it's got to be 7-8 years ago now. So that was like it was a 6-liter LQ4. It had dual vapor propane mixers on it. It made like 700 wheel with it was like a Magnum GT45, 80 mil, like that old. And
I had one on my Fairmont.
Yeah. That was like right after Master Power stopped selling to the U.S. Like Buren used to sell the Master Powers. Then all of a sudden, I think those were like one of the first Chinese turbos because they just took whatever Master Power was doing and then turned it into these Chinese Magnum turbos. Yeah, and I had the 80. It was an 8077, I think. Same as the regular GT45 exhaust side, but it worked good and it was fun. It went 1076 at 128 at 4,600 pounds, and I literally drove the balls off that truck. Like I beat the shit out of it every day. It made me drive like a complete asshole, and I'm pretty sure I was gonna. I'm pretty sure I was gonna end up in jail if I kept the truck, and it was awesome. I never had any problems. And then I sold it to a guy and he babied it everywhere. And he just couldn't drive it. And he ended up hating it because I was like, man, this thing has like two settings, like wide open and idle. I'm like, don't try to half throttle this thing because it's a carburetor that I tune with a Dremel and like, just so
propane.
Yeah. Now propane's not going to be cheap anymore. So we have E85 here, so there's really no reason to do propane stuff anymore. But I grew up when I was an apprentice as a mechanic. I worked on taxis, so that's where I learned like taxis used to be on propane, old Crown Vics and Caprices and stuff. So I learned the in and outs at like 16 years old of propane, and then I moved where I live now in Calgary, and I go to the junkyard and it's full of like all these propane converted vehicles because they'd have all these stupid little problems and people would just scrap them. So I just go pull off all the parts and I used them to convert my truck, and that's the only time I'll ever own a carburetor, and it wasn't even a real carburetor. But
well, there's what's your favorite or least favorite transmissions?
Especially recently, 4L65s, but most favorite, I'm a huge Turbo 400 advocate because for what they can do for what little parts they need, they're pretty amazing, right? Like we've pulled $80, like 4L80s are the same if you can control it, but then you got to buy the converter that costs the money too. Yep, but like we've done stupid shit with an $80 Turbo 400 and a $200 converter that like shouldn't have been done, right? Like I got my buddy Ryan has a Zephyr wagon, and it's literally like a $75 tranny with some random converter, and the thing has just not died. We took it apart once. It doesn't even have a good sprag in it. It doesn't have anything. It's got steel pistons and a bunch of holes drilled in the separator plate and a bunch of other mods so that it's still column shift, so it can shift in drive, and it runs low tens. Like it's ridiculous. Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I have.
I'm cheap, so like the cheapest thing that holds the most power is always going to be my favorite, and the least, like 4L60s, I had to fix one recently, and I want nothing to do with those fucking things. Like it's just like if you're good at them, that's probably like one of those guys that are into that kind of thing. Most of the guys who do really good 4L60s don't really do much of anything else, and I don't want to be that.
Or they don't do aftermarket. Like Cameron just fixes dailies with them.
Yeah, well, that's fine. Like I worked in a transmission shop for a year as a diagnostic tech, but I didn't do the transmission stuff. And the guy who did transmissions could smoke weed all day and build 4L60s and in his sleep, right? Like he was that good at it, and he never had a problem. Like the dude would pull in a half-ton truck in the morning, pull the tranny, rebuild it, and he'd be going home at 4:00. Like it was just insane. Like with the truck out the door, like just like I said, like if you're good at it, you're good at it. But
yeah, 400s. I've had the same experience with a $75 plow truck transmission, and like putting bolts in it and drilling some holes and buying a converter for $100 off some old head with a small block, and I had 40% converter slip, but it never hurt the trans, and the car would go like mid-tens all day, one of my Fairmonts, and then all I did was burnouts all day in high gear with that car, all day, pedaling, high gear, pedaling, second, whatever, and literally 40% slip, because that car, it would only go so fast, and I'd spray it with like 100, 200 shot. It would only go so fast. And then when I learned more about converters, I'm like, how do I have a 273 gear? And why am I going through the traps at 6,000, 6,600? You do the math, it should be like 205. I'm like, I'm not doing 200. I'm trapping like 130.
Yeah.
132. I think one time it went 139. Maybe the fluid was real thick, but
Yeah, it was cold.
I would drive it
Yeah.
to the track and everything, and it was like the shittiest 400 we ever found, and it was fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. They're just I build turbo 400s. I can do 4L80s, but it's just like I do so many different things that I try to stick with one good thing, and I know they work, and I know if something happens, if it's something I did or something. I don't want to be a jack of all trades for transmissions. Like I've built C4s, I built power. I can build power glides. I've built turbo 350s when I was an apprentice and stuff like that. But like I just stick to the turbo 400 because I was like, I can tell you it's going to be this much if you want it this way and this much if you want it that way. And it's going to be good, right? Like I have a couple buddies that like tearing stuff up. I have a buddy with a C5 Corvette that has a rear mounted turbo 400 and he literally broke everything possible on that tranny this year and tested my patience pretty far, but now he's going solid axle, so we're going to have to just put it up
Put one in the front,
so,
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, this is what's a motto or saying that you live by?
I don't know. I just try, like, the biggest motto I do, like, I have some health conditions and stuff. I have lupus and stuff, and for the last 10 years I've been dealing with that, and I just, like, honestly try to make the best of every day. Like I just go out and go hard as much as I can, because there might be a day that I can't. So we're always, like, I got 3 or 4 projects stacked at a time, so it's just like I live like every day kind of like it's last, not like that I'm like reckless about it, but then I learned like I'm gonna live forever. That's kind of my big thing. Like that's kind of my motto. So like I love learning about new things, and I love being challenged and in a good way, and that's kind of, I just try, I try to do something, learn something new, or I'll wake up in the middle of the night and want to know why something is that way, and I'll start Googling. Like I'm the king of Google. Like I'll take 5 different opinions off of Google and make my own opinion about it, and then still try it and make my own decision about it. That's the biggest thing. I really like proving stuff wrong, kind of like what you do. I'm always trying, like I have no fear of breaking stuff or what people think of me if I wreck shit. Like I have wrecked 3 Ks this year on my car, and it was all by my personal fault. How else do you learn? Yeah, like when we started this, like we've been like back in the Turbo Mustangs days, everybody was on like, oh, 7 pounds of boost, you need rods and pistons on an LS and shit like that, and guys just started pushing, and the next guy pushes a little farther, and the next guy pushes a little farther. He's like, well, and that's kind of how I live. I just kind of push stuff as far as I can and see what it'll do. If it can't do it, then you learn that experience. But I think a lot of people are scared of failing these days. Like it's just like there's so much public shaming about if you screw up or make a mistake, and people that have no idea what they're doing will shame you for because you tried something to find out, to learn what you're doing, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, so, yeah, absolutely. And I'm in like a funny spot where if I had a shop or something, I couldn't do what I do. Or I mean, after a long enough time, if your place survives, you can. Because people are like, well, regardless, those cars are fast, and he's not afraid to tell you if he did something wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how people are with me mostly. But, first starting, like, a bunch of people gave me flack. And then, like, once they learned that I don't care and I'm doing it for, like, the yellow bullet topic was one of the big ones. I mean, that's gone now, but everyone's like, what a jerk and how stupid. And I'm like, we're just kids and we're having fun. Because it was like... it was so long ago. I was a teenager. Yeah. And I'm like, we don't care. We're just being stupid. Like, I'm like, you guys ever drive a car in a field? That's what we're doing. It's like the Joker saying where he's like, if I'm like a dog chasing a car, I wouldn't know what to do with it if I got it.
Yeah.
Same thing. Like, I wouldn't know what to do if the car survives. I would laugh if it blows up. I had all the time in the world then to blow it up. But then,
I've wrecked a ton of stuff too, and that's how I learned experiences. And I remember being an apprentice, and I built like 302s, and they blow up, and the running joke was like every weekend I'd go home on Friday and they'd be like, "Oh, what are you doing this weekend? Rebuilding your motor?" I'm like, "Yeah, probably." But
Yeah.
I learned a lot, and one of the hardest, the biggest tuition things like that has been talked about before is learning things by breaking things, right? Because it'll always make you humble.
Yeah. And then my favorite part of it, since I like calling people out and talking so much shit and I think everybody lies, is when they do and I'm like, no, that's 100% incorrect. And they're like, well, how do you know? I'm like, well, I actually did 15 videos on why that's incorrect if you want to watch them.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, they run out of things to say. I'm like, yeah, I did it.
Yeah, luckily I have a buddy. His name's Toma from Dynomotive. We shared a shop for like 8 years before I had the dyno and stuff like that, and I got to learn like kind of as an apprentice. I've seen thousands of dyno pulls before I even made a dyno pull myself, kind of thing, before I ever tuned something. So I got to see because I used to help him out with the mechanical diagnosis. He would do all the tuning, but then when people's fuel pumps would take a shit or misfire or whatever, I kind of helped would jump in because I was working in the back on building people's LS swaps and stuff. So I got to learn a lot of both ends of why things do each way on it. And I think that like now that I've been tuning, it just gave me such a huge head start in the tuning work,
Absolutely.
like a huge jump, right? Because
you know where mechanical issue is when you're seeing it on the electronics.
Yeah, and you see, stuff's weird. Like imagine jumping on a dyno and you don't know what a misfire looks like, or something like that, or something instantly changes where you do a pull and it's 700 horsepower, and then the next pull instantly it's 550, which 550 isn't terrible, but it wasn't 700. So why did it do that? What did it change? And the craziest part about it is now that I'm tuning is how much, like I've seen it so many times. It's such a joke about how everybody blames everything on the tune. Like I deal with that constantly, where 99%, like I literally just dealt with it yesterday on an SRT AG, where it's like a mechanical problem, but everybody thinks it's the tune because that's one thing they can't control, right?
Just keyboard it out.
Yeah, like I had a SRTJ yesterday. It had plus 30% fuel trims on one bank and negative 30% fuels on the other bank, and they were trying to blame it on cutting out the cats. And I'm like, I can't fix this. The guy wanted to dyno. I'm like, I'm not dynoing this. Like this is not how this works, right? Like it has to be in somewhat sound condition before it goes on the dyno, or it's just going to blow up and make me look bad, right? Like,
oh, these are some good ones. Potatoes throwing out really good ones. This is, what do you do for yourself as a small gift when you're having a shit day? Go home, probably. Stop messing with the cars. Go home.
I don't know. Like I'm pretty cheap, so sometimes I'll buy something that I really wouldn't have bought normally, or something I was holding out on to get a better deal, and then I'll finally just say fuck it and I'll buy it, right? Like I'm always trying to find the deals because I got 3 or 4 cars deep of projects. So like if I can save $75 10 times, that's $750 I can spend on another turbo. For like, it's not like I'm saving it to retire on. I'm just saving it to spend on other stupid shit and stuff like that. So like I'll once in a while I'll just say fuck it. And with this Honda stuff, I end up doing that a lot because I've pushed the stock stuff pretty far. So now I'm trying to just go really fucking fast with it. So now it's kind of like I've splurged on a lot of things. That thing has a lot of stuff that I could have built a really badass LS car with comparatively for what it did, right? So
I was going to say the same thing. Joe Simpson said O2 sensors are plugged in backwards. I've run into it on a lot of Chevys and stuff like that, especially Corvettes, because the sensors are like almost touching each other. Yeah. So they'll be even split because one's fueling more because it thinks it's lean, and then the other is, they're crossing the trims.
Oh, yeah. I never gave it much thought. I literally just hooked up to it and I said, take it back to the guy you built it. So sometimes it's just, that's the nicest thing about not actually working on cars and tuning on cars, is being able to just send people home. That's like probably one of the greatest gifts I've gone from building cars and tuning them to just tuning them, is when you finally had enough, it's like, it's time to go home. Like, that's the thing, is just like, if you don't want to deal with it, you give them an idea of what they should be looking at. Like, I showed this guy, he had like a Diablo on his hand thing on his dash, and I just told him, I'm like, when those are within 5%, come back. So
Joe said 95% of tuning is figuring out what's mechanically wrong with someone's car.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
Well, that's what Chris.
Well, when things go wrong, that's where different tuners shine. I totally believe anybody can tune, but it's when shit hits the fan and you got something that's doing something weird and you got to figure it out, is where like a good tuner shines, right? Like when you start seeing weird stuff, or it's doing weird like boost leaks, or I've had all kinds of crazy shit happen over the last 2 years, and I was like, sometimes I'm just like, how would anybody else figure this out, right? Like, That's how it kind of was. Like when I was a drivability and diagnostics, you were the end of the line. You were the person that had to figure it out. There was nobody to pass the buck with. So it didn't matter if it took an hour or it took 10 hours, you were the final say in what something happens. And like, especially when you specialize in something like that, is you don't have someone to pass the buck. It's not like when you're in, if one of the regular mechanics that I worked with couldn't figure it out, they drop it on me, right? So I learned a lot about how every single sensor works in and out. Like when you know how every sensor works, and I've talked to other people who tune, I'm not going to call them tuners, but I've talked to other people and they don't even know how like a map sensor or a TPS, the basics, how a 0 to 5 volt sensor, or even a relay for that matter, works, right? Or how you can make it work to do different things is the biggest thing, right? So
when I tell people about the nitrous tune-up that I do with a 5-wire relay for a stock ECU, and I tell them that I just use the common on the sensor, and then I swap it through a resistor that equals, you don't even have to biff the tune, you just put it at like 200 degrees or something.
Yeah.
And then that's like a -7 on a 225 shot. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I just spit through a resistor on the return through the 5-pole when the kick comes on. When the kick comes on, it swaps the 5-pole. And they're like, what? Again? Like they just... And I'm like, you don't have to load a nitrous tune or anything. You just...
No, you just have an automatic timing pull.
Right? Yeah. And they're like, what? And, they always buy like the Lingenfelter box. I'm like, you still have to physically turn it down. And then it introduces timing errors because it's intercepting and changing.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
the simplest solution is usually the best one sometimes.
Yeah, I'm like, while you build the kit, just get another relay and wire this in, and it's really actually very easy. But yeah, this is yeah. Well, that's what like I would say you and I and other people learn because you don't have anything and you're doing it the cheapest and you have a good mechanical grasp and you're like, I'll use a 5-pole.
Yeah. Oh, it's crazy. Like, especially when you can do awesome stuff like on Holly, right? Like you can make it do a million different things. And if you don't understand the concept of a double pole relay or a solid state relay for that matter, you're never...
It's very limiting capability wise.
Because like I've used a relay to trigger a relay to trigger a relay to do stupid weird shit. Like it's just...
I had a friend's car that had like a really semi-complex nitrous setup.
Yeah.
And I'm like, same thing. I'm like, use a regular relay and a 5-pole for when you're on the brake, it won't spray. When you release the brake, it will spray. And then when you go to, if you have 2 kits, you can use the thing that tells it it's in second and it sprays the second kit.
Yeah, or like an
purely mechanical, no box or anything.
Yeah.
Because it had a big converter in it. I'm like, you don't need a switch. Like this thing, it doesn't need anything. The nitrous is going to hit. Like it just had a micro switch on the throttle.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you just smack it. The converter's going to come up and And then when you hit second, the second kit comes on, and I wired it for him just like the 3 relays in a row. I'm like stage 1, trans brake, stage 2. And he's like,
Yeah.
and then I put it all
like
in
back. It's
what's
like
that?
back in the day with the digisets, right?
I actually, what is that?
It's like a mechanical timed switch. So it's like,
Oh. Oh, with the push button with the LCD screen?
no, it's just like little flip switches, like little DIP switches, and you just flip them, and it's like
A
0.01
delay.
of a second, 1 second each line. So you just add
Oh,
them up. And
okay.
guys used to use that. Used to be like the original time based. Guys used them with like a Mac valve for time based boost control, and then they used them for nitrous timers and stuff like that. But you could do that. You can do that mixed with something else, and it used to be a way of doing it. It's pretty outdated
No,
now.
yeah, that sounds.
I
I've
got
heard.
one in a drawer somewhere that I've never used, but
I'd like
I
to see
know
what it looks like.
I know the concept, but
And then I wired it for him. He had all sorts of craziness going on. So he had a standalone fuel cell. It ran on 93, and then it had standalone fuel cell. They would put 110 in for the spray, and then I wired one of those 6-pole fuse panels. So when you activate the nitrous kit, it would turn on the pole, like the whole panel. The panel ran the fuel pump. The panel did this. The panel,
nice.
and then
Yeah.
I'm like, when you have a problem, you flick this switch, and it turns all 6 nitrous components off. And he's like, whoa. And I'm like, yeah, if
Yeah.
you shut off your kit, like it's not turning off the pump, it's not turning off
Yeah.
this, it's not turning off your relays. So once I showed him how easy that could be, just like a panel and 4 relays, he was like,
Yeah, and then
holy
it has a
shit.
little bit of redundancy into it.
And then it's
for
actually
that one.
easier to look at and operate. To just doing it nicely is actually, it's easier than doing it shitty. Because he had it like wire clipped and everything everywhere. I'm like, holy shit, this is bad. This is a fire.
but,
This is a backfire and a
but
fire.
nitrous guys, all the wires would have been red anyways. So.
It's wire nutted, one wire. This is a good one. What automotive experiment would you like to do but haven't?
We're going to be doing one this winter. Actually, me and you talked about it. I'm going to do some pretty crazy. I'm going to push 87 really far.
Oh,
I did it a
yeah.
little bit on my dually, but I'm going to build a specific combo for 87 and see how far I can go on 87 intercooled, semi-low compression. That's kind of one of the next ones that I want to try. I haven't done a ton of LS stuff lately, but I want to do an updated kit for the 07 to 13 Chev trucks that I sell. My 9906, I just adapt my 99 to 06 turbo kits for the newer trucks, but I want to build a specific kit for that. So we're going to turbo it. It's a 4.8. We're doing a 4L80 in it. I'm going to get a converter from Ryan Jans. And then I'm going to do 78, 75, probably a 2.5, Gen 2.5.
Like a cast or something?
No, probably a billet because I just want maximum efficiency, right?
Yeah.
And we're gonna do probably a bigger boost, low timing, good intercooler, like a big intercooler.
Oh, with the charge air, yeah.
Yeah. So try to make the air as cold as possible, and then just see how far I can push reliably on this 4.8.
People have asked about that, and other people chastise them, why would you do that? And you and I jump in I would love to, but no one really builds something like that. One of the cars, I've done a few cars with the billet 80 millimeter from Reversion with the smaller V-band inlet.
Oh yeah,
and they make outstanding power on pump gas.
that's like the 8075 or the 8082.
It's tough because it's the V-band. I would say it's
Yeah.
smaller. It's probably like the 75,
Yeah.
even if it is a larger turbine.
Yeah, that would be like that. You'd that would be perfect on a 4.8 because you'd have all the efficiency of the 80 mil, but then you don't have this crazy lazy.
Because you're not going to
backside.
turn it. It's not like a car you're going to try to make 900 with.
No, you're gonna run out of octane, right? No matter how you do it, you're gonna run out of octane. So my big goal is to push it as far as I can on 87, and then I'm gonna put straight meth, methanol injection on it with straight meth, and see how much farther I can get it on 87 and by increasing, because straight meth you're increasing the octane. If you were doing water meth, you're increasing the knock resistance.
Yeah,
but I just
buffer.
want to see yeah, I want to see how far I can push it with that. And it's a newer, it's a '08 truck, so it's like 8.8 to 1, so it's already as low compression as I'd want to go because it's got 243s on it, and it's already got the good intake and stuff on it. So none of that shit I really have to change. We're gonna put a LS9 cam in it to kill the dynamic compression. Yeah, to kill the dynamic compression. And then we're just going to make all the power with boost and RPM pretty much.
That's what my buddy Ryan Ackerman has. That he has a Colorado with the LSA on it and all the stock pulleys, and he has sloppy stage 2 and headers and everything. And I'm like, man, it's not going to make any boost. It'll be neat to see because I was like, we might as well tune it on 87. So we did 87 and then E85. I've done that on a bunch of cars because they're either going all in or they're just trying to drive it, get it home, or they can't get E. And then we do a pretty soft tune-up on gas, and then we switch it to E and go hard. And then a few of those cars don't pick up much at all, which must be they're not octane limited at all.
No, that has to be what it is.
That's a good combo. Is the LY6 only made like 40 extra horsepower on E, which is probably just like the thermal BTU scrub of the alcohol because it didn't want timing or anything above pump.
Yeah.
I said to him, I'm like, you made too good of a pump gas engine and now it won't pick up because I've had some cars with some pretty significant compression obviously don't want to do pump very well at all. But then on low boost on E, they pick up like 156 rear wheel on low boost.
Or something with shitty IATs, right? Like you get something with shitty IATs and all of a sudden it picks up a bunch because it's just cooling that you run it a little fat and you cool that air charge down and then all of a sudden it's picking up huge gains. And
usually the 4.8 cars with the flat tops, they make decent. A lot of people have like an 8-pound spring and then they make 130 extra horsepower on E on the same 8 pounds of boost. It's insane.
Yeah.
Oh, if you could build your first turbo LS car now with the knowledge you have, what would you do different? Everything.
Probably. There's just way more like shit like 88 103s from Viren and stuff wasn't available back then, right? Like we were just
That's why Magnum and Master Power first stuff I used.
Yeah, like I probably the first time we bought off Viren was probably 2005-ish. Master Powers, Turbo Mustangs, $450 a piece, and he was like the only dude that would ship to Canada.
And they had that 76. Like, I don't even know what the backside was. I don't.
76, 65. Yeah, we used a bunch of that. Was like a huge upgrade. Everybody's like, "Oh, you'll never spool that shit." Like it was just brutal, right? But now it would be more of everything. If I were to do the propane truck again. I started doing a Colorado with one, but I kind of got sidetracked with the Chevette and I never ended up finishing it. But I was going to do propane. I had dual mixers. I had a Holly intake and it had injectors, and I was going to spray E85 on top of the propane. So it was because propane's really hot, right? Everybody thinks it's super cool, but they use coolant to heat to make the expansion from a liquid to a vapor. So it gets really, really hot while it's going into your engine. So like when we were on propane, we would run stoic wide open, because the fuel offered no cooling capability. So you would run it at 15.0 air fuel. If you ran it at 12, it made no difference. It didn't pick up any power because there's no cooling in the air. But then when I added meth on top of it, it would just soak up the meth and it would pick up huge gains. So I wanted to do that with E85 injectors, is run the propane and then run E85 and let the E85 just soak up all that hot air and mix with it. And it probably would have worked out well, but I kind of gave up on that. But that was 5 or 6 years ago. That's when the Viren had the PT88 clones that were super big, and I had this Colorado, and they ended up getting parted out and moved on to the next.
They did pretty good. I did 740 unlocked with the 88 clone.
Yeah, we did a blow-through car for a guy, and it was like 740-ish on low boost, like 15 pounds on a 6.
Yeah, it got it all in early.
Yeah,
I remember mine.
Like it wasn't really a high boost turbo because it just didn't work up there. But the low boost stuff, I really love that turbo. Like my buddy Mitch that helps me out at my shop, he has one on a Fairmont wagon, and it's awesome. Like he went 970s at 140 on like 14, 15 pounds of boost. It's ridiculous. Like just such a simple combo, right? But that's the thing is there's just everything's gotten better. Back then we were using micro squirts and PT88s and all whatever was available. Like my propane truck had a 6010 MSD box in it to run the ignition, and now we got Holly Terminators and stuff like that. So it's just an 88 103s and bigger turbos than that, and just we know what to push things and we know what doesn't make a difference. Like the cam stuff hasn't really gone crazy. Like I use a ton of the Summit Stage 2 turbo cams.
It's so good. Yeah, because
it's just like
people all the time are like, where do I get a reliable sloppy? And I'm like, there's so many clones, I don't know what to tell you. I think someone posted the other day, there is a guy on sloppy that sells actual Elgin, like he's actually trustworthy, like an actual person.
Well, I was one of the original people who bought one of the clones, unknown to me. And I was like, as soon as I got it, it was like a brown box with a yellow bag. And like you could cut yourself on the lobes and it just looked like shit. You could see the hardening was all shit. And I was like, I'm not using this. And I just returned it back. And then now it's just like that. I paid like 200 whatever, $50 for at the time. Now I just literally, while I was standing in line today, I was scrolling eBay and you can buy the knockoff Elgin for $88. That's like,
people post it and I'm like, no, anything under 205, no. Because sometimes there's like a sale and you can get, but I tell people, but like I don't trust any of them.
As soon as it wipes a cam lobe and eats a lifter and breaks your block and kills your bearings and like I'll roll the dice on a lot of shit, but I won't roll the dice on something like that, right? Like that. Like if you pull your cam out and you're missing a lobe already and you're gonna run it anyways, throw one of those fucking things.
Exactly.
But because that's about as long as it's gonna last, and it's not even gonna wipe out that lobe. It'll wipe out some other lobe that wasn't missing half of the shit, right? Like it's just that's pretty much the one thing I don't super cheap out on. But like cams don't have to be as expensive as they are. Like you see what they're going for and how mass produced. Like Brian's talked about how they mass produce the Summit cams, and it totally makes sense of how they can sell them for so cheap when you're making 1,000 cams at a time, right?
Yeah. Well, I tell people when they don't know what to do, I said just buy the Summit because it's not much more, and they have better drivability, more idle vacuum. Sloppy Stage 2 is garbage. It sounds good. It sounds pretty much the same, and then they do make a little bit more power everywhere. It's just that when the Sloppy Stage 2 was $225 and there weren't $80 clones, it's just like 044s were really good secret. And then China, I think some people were selling Chinese ones and they didn't even know.
Oh, yeah.
It was flooded at
Chinese
one point.
Ones and we didn't even know.
Yeah.
Right? That's
because I've had cars where we can't even get over like a 460 horsepower on gas. And the injector is going nuts. And people are like, well, they're 044s. And I'm like, oh, there are so many that just not good. Nope. Oh, this is good. What's your favorite pet peeve or misconception about cars and drag racing that people, regurgitate?
Oh, there's so many, but like a lot of it is it's easier than it actually looks. People think it's easier than it actually is when it's not. Like to go actually fast, it does take some skill. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes people get lucky and things go fast, but it does take a little bit of skill. Like now you go on Marketplace or something and everybody's selling 6-liter race motors that they think that you can just drop it in with a turbo and it's going to make 800 horsepower out of the junkyard. There is still stuff you have to do to them, and you have to make sure they're somewhat legit, right? Especially now that like it's 2021, like we're going on 20 years of 6-liters right now, right? The shit you're finding in the junkyard from 2002 and 2003 now is probably not good, right? Like so it's like I get people all the time, they're like, oh, I got this 400,000 kilometers here, like 300,000 mile engine, and it's good. We're just going to stab a cam at it. And then they come to the dyno and it has all kinds of problems because they didn't do anything supporting wise. They're like, oh, it only had a little bit of ridge on the cylinder. I'm like, LSs don't do that. Like, if you have ridge on your cylinder, I'm like, that thing was in a cube van for its whole life lugging up a hill and it is wore out, right? Like,
the good one here is, what car or platform won't you touch with a 10-foot pole?
I'm not a BMW Mercedes guy. Just I can't get into them. Just being a regular tech, like, I learned years ago that they were just brutal. Like, it's just, they've always been brutal. I like Volkswagen stuff. It's not too bad. I used to do a lot of work on those, but you couldn't pay me enough to touch a Audi. Audi, I know is Volkswagen, but Audi or any of the higher end Mercedes-Benz, BMWs, I have like zero interest. Like, unless it's LS swapped, I really want nothing to do with it.
Do you have any plans on doing Miles of Mayhem or No Prep 7 next year?
Probably. I don't know about Miles of Mayhem. Depends on how far we get with the Chevette. I'm going to put a new short block in the Chevette, my LT LS hybrid short block finally. But I wanted to do a bunch of stick shift racing with the all-wheel drive car, especially like no prep style stick shift racing. So that's kind of, we'll definitely have that thing out and breaking stuff and doing that kind of thing. If I trust it enough, which I probably won't, I'd take it on. The Miles of Mayhem is like a drag and drive type thing that we do locally here. So it's a little more grueling than some of the ones because it's in the middle of fucking nowhere. Like in Canada, there's like to drive between two tracks, like it's 3 or 4 tracks and one of them's an airport and stuff like that. But it's like, it's not like in the States where you can phone up Summit and overnight parts to your next track and shit. If you break your shit, you're fucking done, right? So like, and I'm just like, I'm not a sucker for punishment for that stuff. Like, I think it's awesome that we have a drag and drive style event locally. But man, like, as soon as my shit broke, I'd just go home. Like, I'd be like, fuck, I gotta lash the valves or something stupid on my all-wheel drive car that would normally be simple. And I couldn't see myself on the side of the road pulling a tranny or anything like that. It's just I've been doing this shit for 20 years, and the last thing I want to be doing is working on my back on the side of the highway or something like that, right? But one day I actually have a Fairmont wagon that I'm going to be doing a Barra in as soon as I can cross the border and go get it. That I would definitely take on Miles of Mayhem. Because I know for sure if it broke, I'd be going home because I ain't finding shit for a bar anywhere. So, but I got a Holly Terminator for it and stuff. I got a bunch of stuff. Like we haven't been able to go across the land crossing into the U.S. for the last 18 months because of COVID.
So all your stuff's piling up.
Yeah, so we ship everything to the border and drive across. I'm about a 2.5-hour drive from Sweetgrass, Montana. So we drive across, pick up our parts, and then drive back. But as soon as COVID happened, they shut that down. So I've had a bar on a pallet and everything to go with it. Holly got me a Terminator and a few other things, and we're gonna lock out the VVT and run it that way. And I bought a Turbo 400 to Barra adapters from Castlemine Rod Shop in Australia. So we're gonna run a Turbo 400 or a 4L80 or something behind it. So that's one. I don't think it's gonna happen this winter because we're so far behind with it, but that's why I'm kind of jumping on the Pinto because I have everything. But that's going to be probably 2022, 2023, or maybe in the summer if I have time. But I got this pretty mint blue Fairmont wagon that we're going to borrow swap with the turbo, probably 78, 75. It's going to be fun.
Someone just said, well, not just. I'm only going through like the very top ones. I don't see anything new. Is a Huron 7875 too small for an LY6? Goal is 650. I'm concerned about back pressure on a 6-liter. I would say it depends on the exhaust you're going to run.
And how high you're going to rev it.
Yeah, if it's like 650, I don't know. That's like a medium. A 7875 is the answer to almost every thing for
Yeah,
people. So yeah, it's you're probably fine if you
it'll
can.
do it, but it'll be right maxed out, like on the exhaust side at that power level, right? Like you'll get the weird layover dyno curve no matter what cam it has, where it just starts ganking out up top. And
If it depends on your exhaust too. If you have like a hood dump, you're gonna be able to make a ton of
yeah,
power.
it'll always go a little bit farther that way. And same with like wastegate size and stuff like that. You can squeak out a little bit more, but like it's a light switch turbo on a 6 liter, but like they're a riot on a 4.8 or 5.3. That's like still my go-to with all my kits that I do for all the shed trucks.
What converter are you thinking for your K20 Power Glide?
I bought a Transbrake ATI Transbrake Turbo 400 for $500, or not Turbo 400 Power Glide at a swap meet for $500. It came with some random 5,000 stall bracket racer converter, so I'm gonna run that, and if it doesn't work, I'm gonna spray the fuck out of it till it does. So that's what I'm gonna start with. It's like a little 8-inch 5,000 stall,
Which should be good for a tiny motor.
Yeah, like I know I've done this stuff before, right? Because my Pinto was a 2.3 with a C4, and it went like 1.360 foots. And so I understand the concept of how small engines work and spool. One of the big things I'm keeping on the K is the, the VTEC, so that I can make big torque on the low lobe and then get it up on the converter and then switch over to the high lobe once it starts making boost, and you have the ability to swap that on a K. Whereas like on my 2.3 that I had, it had some big donkey ding cam in it to make the power, and you couldn't. It made 33 horsepower at 3,500 RPM. You couldn't get it to spool without nitrous on even a tiny little 6,000 stall converter. So.
Oh, you did updates on this, but Motorhead's asking what happened to your Extreme Cheapskates car?
The Malibu?
Yeah.
The Malibu, I sold it the next day because they pretty much lost their shit on me after I went 10-0 with no safety equipment. So it ended up going, it's on my YouTube channel, but I ended up going 10-0 at 135, 10-002 at 135 on the dot with for $2,600, I think it was. And then literally I sold it the next day. Like I had guys that wanted it, and then I literally went from the track to a swap meet on my way home and put a for sale sign in the window and sold it the next day. And now it's a street raced car now because it really had no history. Nobody's seen it at the track. So the guy who bought it ended up selling it to another guy, and that guy street raced the shit out of it till he kicked the rods out of it. And I haven't really heard much about it, but it's still around. It was a fun car, but it would have been way more successful if I didn't use a 3,700-pound Malibu to start with. But.
Yeah. This is funny. Big Stuff 3 or Anderson PMS on a small block Ford.
Big
1995.
Stuff. Apparently you can tune them with Tuner Studio now.
Huh. I've got an 88103 for my 87 octane limit pusher.
That'd be cool. I don't think you'll even get to anywhere the limit of the turbo.
He's
some negative timing like a DSM.
Yeah. BK says I wanted to bring you my 575-1 LS to the dyno. I could never get in touch with you. Ended up ordering my own dyno.
I'm a hard guy to get hold of. Years ago, we had a local guy that had a Neon that had a 6.5-to-1 compression Neon that made 600 horsepower. It was an interesting concept, but he was one of the original low compression pump gas guys that had crazy ideas but made them work. He was on a SDS. I don't know if you've ever tuned or even seen one of those. It was like pretty much a fucking Atari. But
what was it? You said an SDS?
Yeah, SDS EFI. They use them on airplanes. They're certified for aircraft, so that's the only thing that keeps them going. But like literally, you'd probably want to slit your wrists before you.
It's probably like a Phytech.
Oh, worse than a Phytech.
Oh,
like this thing is like up, down, enter. Like it's a keypad. Up, down, enter. Bar graphs, one line at a time, and it's a boostable ECU. It's pretty crazy. It's from like the 90s, but they still sell them because they're like FAA approved for experimental aircraft. But that's all we had back then. Even my Pinto had a Holly Commander on it, which was outdated when I put it on 2007, but at least it was a standalone tuner, right? So
Potatoes throwing out all sorts of funny questions. I'm going to try to look for one that's not one of his.
I can't yo-yo. I see that. I don't cook. That's not. I tell my wife all the time I'm good at everything, but I can't cook. Now I have children, so I don't have to.
Oh, one of them people always ask, and I forget to ask people, what are some of your favorite YouTube channels if you watch a bunch of YouTube?
I'm on a big all-wheel drive Honda kick lately, so I watch a lot of the all-wheel drive Honda stuff. The usual like PFI Speed and Boosted Boys. They're always kind of doing random shit, and then I watch. Oh man, are there other ones I watch? Small. There's like a one channel called the Honda Resource. The guy's name's Philip. He does stuff out of his house. And I'm always looking for new ideas, kind of thing. The biggest thing, like I either watch YouTube for just absolutely dumb entertainment, or I watch it to actually like learn something I didn't know before. So I always watch a lot of these smaller channels that I don't even probably subscribe to them, but I'll watch a couple episodes of everything to see if they know something more than I do, and see if I can do something cool, or when I'm trying to make a decision on something I'm going to do. Like I've been doing a bunch of research on intercoolers right now because I already knew most of it, but I just kind of ignored it about efficiency and stuff like that. So I've been watching a lot of intercooler, what works better, or design and stuff like that. And then all the time, like if I'm going to run something, say I'll go buy a Borg S372 turbo, I'll go watch a bunch of videos and see what guys are making power, and see how much bullshit the dynos they are and stuff, because you always get that part of it too. My dyno's kind of a heartbreaker, so you'll go and watch and you're like, how is this guy making 200 horsepower on the same combo, on the same boost? And,
yeah.
Right, but...
Speaking of intercoolers, Potato asked earlier, with a pressure drop across an intercooler and losses from 90-degree bends, why don't more cars do an air-to-water and run a simpler run to the intake?
Mostly weight, and it's a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
I have an air-to-water on the Chevette, but it's made out of like $80 shitty cores, so it doesn't work as good as it's supposed to, but there's absolutely no room on that car. So it gets it down to like on a 30 pounds of boost, it'll be 140 degrees on a good day, but it's not nothing to write home about. But
I would say fitting a decent air to water is way harder than fitting an air to air, and the bends are almost going to be identical, because I think fitting a giant air to water, you have to bend quite a bit around also.
Yeah, and like unless you plan from the build in the beginning, like my air to water is mounted between my engine and my rad on the Chevette. But if I wanted it, say, under the dash or in the passenger seat or something like that, there's no way in hell, because I didn't build the car to have it that way. Originally, I tried E85 non-intercooled and never really got anywhere with it because we were having other issues with the Mega Squirt and stuff like that back in a few years ago. So like I gave up on that just so we wouldn't hurt the motor, and I just went straight to air to water because there was no room for any other air. There's barely any room for any. But I don't really. I'll put as many bends into an intercooler system as it needs. I don't really consider that. I know velocity and stuff like that, but horsepower wise, it doesn't make as much of a difference as going between a shitty intercooler and a good intercooler.
I noticed the same thing. Like I did that test with my Colorado where all we had was straights, and we built that intake pipe that was like, it looked like it was just jammed in a car wreck a bunch of times. It was so crooked. And then I had Joey like spend a whole bunch of time making like the nicest 30-degree sweeps.
Yeah.
And we made a dyno hit on low and high boost, and then immediately swapped it and went high and low, and it was 0 horsepower.
Yeah.
No difference at all.
Yeah, I don't think under people understand that air bends. Like that's the biggest thing is air will get to where it needs to go. Like you look at all the manifolds, like even like the turbo manifolds and shit you built back in the day, and we built a couple recently for
Disgusting.
X5.
And I did
And
that for a purpose
the
also.
air will always the air will always get to where it's going. The
Yeah.
worst back pressure you get, if say it's not optimal, your wastegate's probably going to work better because the more back pressure in your exhaust, the more it's going to want to go out the wrong direction, right? But we just built my buddy Mitch that helps me out. We just built a LTD for his wife, and literally the turbo manifold on the hot side is a T. Like it comes out of one side and tees into the other runner crossing over. And I'm like, I've explained to people, I'm like, well, one's running straight into here, other one's coming this way. It's going to bend the other air to get it going in the correct direction. Like it's like you look at hydraulic systems, they don't give a shit. They'll put like a hard 90 and another hard 90, and that's fucking hydraulic fluid, not air, right? Like
1,600 pounds, 3,200 pounds.
Yeah, and it'll get, like it said, it'll get to where it needs to go.
No, that's why I built a lot of those ugly hot sides, because I have a bunch of 10 and 9-second cars I built with spare stuff, and I would do the reverse T also. Yeah. I would flow the hot sides like this and then come off of like a thing for my up pipe. Yeah. And everyone's like, that's not even going to go anywhere. I'm like, what makes 564 wheel? It's not that bad.
I learned a long time ago a lot of that stuff, especially like turbo kits and shit like that. There is some exceptions. It seems like the K-series stuff is a little more susceptible to back pressure because you don't have control of the exhaust cam. But a lot of it is like your turbo kit is just a pipe from point A to point B. Like as long as you can get the shit from the head to the turbo, it's probably gonna fucking work unless you really screw it up, right? Like like one way or another, it might not be optimized. Like
of course,
you can, but like I've had it where we used to mess with it back in the day, where we did the similar shit where we changed up a turbo kit and like the flange was restricted, so we ported out the flange and it made no difference. So I stopped wasting my time on that kind of shit. You just kind of get it to go where it needs to go.
Yeah, when people talk
if you can plan for it, is great. But if you're just trying to have fun, don't worry about it.
Don't touch it.
Just don't worry about it. Just get your shit to the turbo and somehow jam a wastegate in a couple places if you need to. And if you put one on and it's not enough, add another one. And go from there.
Yeah, like I mean, that's everything I ran into. Is I obviously agree. There's like a 10% you can eke out of a lot of stuff, but most people are gonna pop a motor on low horsepower way before you need to port match a plastic intake to an aluminum head.
Yeah. Nothing that 1 or 2 pounds of boost can't fix.
That's the funniest thing about, especially an LS doesn't seem to care about so much. It doesn't care. It just shrugs. And then, like, you just throw more at it, whatever.
Well, people get hung up on a boost number, right? I'm like, who cares if your car makes 600 on 14 or if it makes 600 on 17 pounds of boost? I'm like, are people going to look down on you because your shit took 2 more pounds of boost to make 600 horsepower?
It was probably $2,000 in cylinder heads why it makes more power on less boost.
Yeah, like I got trick flows on the Chevette, but I did it for like head gasket sealing.
I did the same on mine. I was going to do a test between a stock head and an aftermarket for fun, and then the more I thought about it, I'm like, all I'm going to do is lift these stock ones. So I got my engine builder had some badass CNC'd. They have a LS3 valve set up, but then they have a cathedral port intake.
Oh, yeah.
And then, I was like, these weigh twice what a stock cylinder head does. And then he showed me when you look in the water passage on the very end,
you can see how thick it is.
A stock one has like a 1/4 inch probably, and this one has like 3/4 inch to a full inch of deck. And that's on the skinny side by the water jacket. He was like, it will not warp as much. And that's what I learned too, because people were like talking about cylinder heads, and I'm like, just throw 10 more pounds at it. And then someone, I think it was Jarrett or somebody intelligent that I trusted, was like, the aftermarket heads have like 3 times the deck thickness, and it stops them from lifting. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
That's what no one tells you, because they probably don't know. They just want to buy fancy cylinder heads.
Yeah, for sure. I
People
bought the
on
cheapest. Yeah, like the trick flows were like the cheapest heads you could buy, and so I was like, yeah, I'll buy those, and they fit on the stock 453. So I was like, yeah, let's do this, and I bought those, and I've been happy with it. Didn't really seem to make any difference in power, but it did work. So.
Do you have interest in different forms of engines, like turbine or jet, for example?
Not a ton. Not kind of. I like different platforms. Like I'm not just like that's why one of the reasons why I kind of got back into a four-cylinder game, because that's what I kind of started out with when I got into turbo stuff. Is I just like the underdog of having like a small engine that makes ridiculous power, that's crazy efficient and stuff like that. But never really got into any of the other types of things. Like I try to keep all my eggs in one basket. I do enough of that kind of thing. It is, but
Yeah, I jumped straight into like Turbo LS stuff at some point. Well, obviously the most I ever did. And then I always wanted to build like a Turbo Civic,
yeah,
because I had a bunch of friends that had them and they were wild for what they were, and they totally changed your mind on what you would perceive a
yeah.
crappy old Honda with. And some were crap, and then some I was like, this is genuinely like extremely fast.
Yeah.
I had
Around here we had like before drifting got really big, it was all the turbo Honda stuff. And I never really got into it. I wasn't really like I was into four-cylinder stuff, but I thought front wheel drive was kind of dumb. Just because all those guys ever did was really spin, right? So none of the shit ever hooked. And there was a few fast guys and stuff too, and it kind of just petered out around here, and all those guys turned into drift kids, and they were just blowing up SR20s and shit like that after that. And they instead of blowing up their single cam D16s on eBay turbo kits and not being able to afford anything, they all just turned into drift kids with plywood body kits and stuff like that.
But that's, yeah, I was always like, I want to build a turbo Honda with a light switch power band just because I want to. That's what I always wanted to do. Like I tell people, if I built a Supra, I wouldn't get any of those awesomely efficient, like Real Street talks about, some of those like wide power band, high number, awesome, weird scaled, like 7582 precisions and stuff that come out now. I'm like, I want just a upside down hockey stick that's undrivable. That's what I want. I want it to
Yeah.
be like blah, and then like a wheel spin, just endless. Like
Yeah.
can't control it.
That's kind of how mine and my son's all-wheel drive car is. It just comes on at about 7,500 RPM, and then
It's like getting rear-ended by a truck. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're just. But the thing with the all-wheel drive is just it doesn't blow the tire off. It's
It
just
actually hooks it.
flying. Like you're just. It's the thing is just rolling, and we're just my kid's yelling at me. He's like, "We're doing 150 miles an hour." I'm like, "Shit!" I'm like, "Your mom's gonna kill me."
But I did that. You posted about that the other day. That was hilarious when I read that. I did a single cam because again, everyone had B series, so I'm like, I'm gonna build a single cam, and I'm gonna be a retard, and it ended up making 324 to the tire. And unbeknownst to me, the D series stuff had longer transmissions. The B series were shorter to try to be in their power band. So it was actually extremely functional 300 wheel. Like I could pedal it really well, and like I had no secrets. It just ran. I did Vitara pistons and FJR rods, so it had like a 7.5 to 1 compression. So I ran 30 pounds on pump, and it was like. It had an eBay turbo kit, and the turbo did not have good transient. It was like nothing, and then completely retarded. And then since it had like, the turbo was so inefficient and it had stock cams and everything, it quit. Like it would light and quit immediately. And I just had the rev limiter set really high to try to fall before that it would not make boost, try to stay above. Yeah, so I'd shift it at like 7,800, so it would fall to 68-ish to still be in boost. Because it was dog below 5,500. It was terrible.
Yeah, that's a Honda thing. But yeah, I don't like. I'm not really. Everybody thinks I'm this like hardcore Honda guy, but I barely know shit about anything other than case. So it's just like everybody asks me all these B series questions. I'm like, I don't know a fucking thing. I'm like, if it ain't in the junkyard, I don't know anything about it. But all those things are huge money now, like all the VTEC V16 stuff. And
Yeah.
like, man, you got to be like really dedicated into that shit to be doing that over some junkyard K stuff or something like that. They're doing like 600 wheel now with fucking junk K24s out of a TSX fresh. So it's pretty crazy that way.
Yeah, I got to do a lot of catching up on K-Series stuff for what I'm doing. I'll have to get some recommendations from you, but I think we're gonna do the eBay Turbo, and I'm gonna run like 5 pounds non-intercooled for now.
It'll be fine.
And I gotta weigh that truck then, because it's not gonna weigh a damn thing.
Yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be fun.
Because there's no front end, and I mean, I'm sure I'll probably will end up cutting a bunch of it, because there's needless amount, like I said, boxed for no reason. And they boxed, it's like a Coke can. Why even box it? So I was gonna cut the whole nose out, and then like put in tubing or something, and then see how
like that thing's got to be lighter than like an EG Civic, right? Like it's those things, they're all gone now. They all rusted away because they were made of such thin metal, like even thinner than Hondas. So I remember they were, my friends had them 20 years ago and they were rusted away. So
already
still got a good one is pretty amazing.
Yeah, and like I said to her, like her Evo has a grocery getter tune that makes 400 all wheel on 18 pounds on a Mustang dyno. Yeah. And I said to her, like, this thing will make 400 wheel no problem, even with probably an eBay turbo. And it'll shit on your Evo because it'll probably be 1,000 pounds less.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried the Gen 5 crank and the Gen... This guy says, I know you did videos, and you said earlier he might.
I just haven't finished it yet. So on the Chevette, I ended up wiping out the thrust because I have an eBay Power Glide in it that I bought for $999, and it never had any of the
drain back or whatever.
170 with a $999 tranny that I've never ever even opened up. But so it didn't have the restrictor in the pump feed. And it wiped out the thrust eventually once we started leaning on it. So the next short block that's going in the Chevette is the LT4 rod with the LT1 crank and the 5.3, the LC9 block and pistons. So I was actually going to drop it off for balancing the other day here. I just was waiting for some of my K parts to show up so I could drop them all off at once. But that's what's going in the Chevette for the next time it comes out with twin BorgWarner S372s. So hopefully we can turn it up a little bit that way. I keep debating on it if I'm going to go to methanol too, just for something to learn. But
I'm really curious. I know KSR has brought that to light for a lot of people, but the switching the fuel system, we're going to do that on Cameron's car. It's going to run on whatever and then swap over to methanol. But one of my friends, Devin, sent me a tune for a Dominator and showed me how that works. And I was like, oh man, that's easier than I thought it would be. Like the way it uses the external box and switches over, and you can change percentages. I was wondering how. My wife commented here. I didn't see when the time was, but she was writing stuff. But I was so far up, waiting for questions, I didn't even see it. She always comes in to talk smack on me. Much appreciated. I always wanted to do methanol. It's something I haven't done, so I want to. So what's cool is Cameron's going to do it, and I can learn.
So is he going to just use 2 sets of injectors, or is he going to one set is going to be like gas and one set's going to be?
I don't know if he has figured it out yet, but he's going to do. He got a BTR intake with the double injector stuff done. So he has that, and I think he wants to swap over from like E85 straight to that. Yeah. Or run like a mix. I don't think you can mix, though, that well and get the air fuel right between a little bit of E and a little bit of meth. So at some point, it's got to switch off. So then he's got to have some really large secondaries. So I don't know.
Yeah, that would be if I do it, I'm just going to run 2 sets of 210s on
That's what Devin does.
Super low intakes. And then ditch the intercooler and do it that way, because it seems like everybody's having pretty good success. And then you don't need the extra driver box and shit like that. You can just do it all in the
Yeah,
dominator.
because
But
it has enough amperage to run 2 sets
yeah,
internally.
and like if I ditch my intercooler, where the intercooler sits, I could do like a surge tank, and then I'll just use my rear tank to fill the front, and then just do like some sort of belt drive. Or my
Yeah,
cooling system sucks on that car, so it needs a total redo. So I'd probably do like a cam drive fuel pump, and then do an electric water pump, and then keep that to the side. And then on methanol, the intercooler would, or the radiator would probably work fine. And I'd
yeah.
still run
It'll
water.
knock
Because
it. It'll get frost
yeah,
on your
because I
intake.
learned that even with like the Mini. The Mini has the radiator mounted underneath, and when it doesn't steam airlock, it works incredible. Like it's like 120 degrees with no airflow, and maybe it'll just sit there and idle around all day with the intake frosting. But then as soon as you start wailing on it, my cooling system needs a, a way to get the air out of it, and I didn't have that for LS Fest. So as soon as it would airlock, the flow would stop flowing, and I would just drive it till it stopped running.
What's your favorite cheap LS boost cam?
I love the Summit Stage 2. I have actually, I posted a picture a while ago, but I have like 13 of them that I've used. I still have 13 leftover boxes as like kind of a souvenir of keeping track of how many I've used. Like I used to use like a lot of, like when we did the trucks back in the day, we used to use the sloppy stage 1. Like I've been using those before we
Great
even
cam.
called them that, right? Like you used to buy them for $100 off of LS1 Tech, because everybody thought they were, that's when everybody was going full retard on the cams and going like 250, 260 on a stock LS1, and they're selling off these trick flow stage 1 cams for $100. And I started using them, and we made, like my propane truck had one, and it made incredible torque. Like it was just like 700 horsepower and 695 foot-pounds of torque. And that, like when you have a heavy ass vehicle, those things, they kind of make the vehicle. It just rolled out so hard for such a big truck. Whereas a lot of guys overcam their shit, and it ends up being less fun because you're not making the torque that also helps spool the turbo and all that kind of shit, right? So
This guy asked, what cam would you suggest for an NA-LS3 with a manual trans? That's one of those can of worm questions. What do you want to do with it? You know, is it a race car? Do you want it to idle? Do you want it to drive okay?
yeah, if
So
that's all
many.
it's going to be, are you going to do something with the future? Like everybody says they want an LS car till they drive an LS car, like a big cam LS car, and then they realize they want a blower or a turbo, and then you want something else. Like
That you can't putz it around a parking lot unless you're doing
yeah,
20 in first.
it's like how you always say with the goals, right? You want to know what your big picture is. If right now you just want a big choppy ass cam, buy that. But if you're going to turbo or blower the thing down the road, choose your cam accordingly, and then just deal with the less power that it's going to make compared to this big ass cam that's not going to drive with a shit.
Oh, this is a good question that a lot of people should probably hear again from Potato. It says, so you've hypothetically built a Don't BS Me build and you want to take it a full step or two further. What would you upgrade? You want me? I want to answer and you can answer too.
Sure, you answer first.
I would say go big on the turbo and fuel system. Because the
Yeah,
engines are capable, it's just getting the fuel and air in there.
yeah, it's kind of like the next level, right? Like you just need more air and more fuel to make more power, right? So like you're gonna find the what's gonna the weak links of everything else, but just to make the power, that would be the next thing. Like I love that 88 103 that Beard makes. Like it's
I can't wait
uh,
to do that on someone's car. That's what I've always wanted to see. Because
yeah,
Caesar posts up like 1250 rear wheel stuff with it. I'm like, man, that's the big single we've all been waiting for.
yeah. Like he was doing like the 67 66s from Beard too. Oh, like a couple years ago, and guys were making like 1,300 on them
I can't
on
wait.
an
Mine
LS.
has 67, 62 billet dual ball bearing mirrors. So I can't wait to have like a light switch 11 or 1300.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and he was like, Caesar does all those OBS Chef trucks and stuff, and
Yep.
they were running like eights on those VS turbos.
All
And
those
everybody
Mexican
was
dudes
asking
love
for
those
a while.
trucks.
Yeah, and it's just crazy. But that 88103, like power per dollar, that would be like for the next up from like an S475. That would be what I would do.
Yeah,
I'd
I
do
try to tell
that.
people too, go big, go real
Yeah,
big right away, because everything
yeah.
else is a waste.
Yeah, you're pretty much going to have to do that. You're going to have to make sure you have enough fuel system to max out a set of 210s on like 58 psi.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to have to make sure you have some sort of intercooler set up that's not going to be the restriction at that power level, because your typical 12 by 24 by 4 standard Viren intercooler or whoever else sells them isn't going to get you to
Yeah,
that
you need like a
level
6-inch in the whole front
yeah,
of the
like
car.
a 6-inch or a legit Garrett, like the Garrett cores. I've been looking at it because I'm going to probably put one on my Civic. They've gotten ridiculously cheaper. Like they're the big thing is like, even if it's like, especially if you're running on E85, even if you have a shitty intercooler, you don't want it to be a restriction. Like even if it can't knock the heat down, you run a bigger vertical flow intercooler that has twice the area for the hot side to go through. It's not going to knock you might still have 150 degree IATs, but E85 doesn't really give a shit about that. But you're not having a 10 psi pressure drop across the intercooler to restrict the air going from hot to cold, right? Like it's just going to go through. It's not going to cool. So that's like a worst case scenario. But like a lot of the newer intercoolers, like that on 6-inch, it's not going to really offer great cooling in the rear part of the thickness of the intercooler. I've learned a lot about intercoolers because that's what I was watching on YouTube, right? Like you want you're better off with twice the surface area and half the thickness than you are with twice the thickness and half the surface.
I've learned that about air to waters with a bunch of cars, especially.
Yeah, because most of the cooling happens in the first, like your first 3 inches of thickness and your first, say, 20 inches of intercooler, right? Like the last 4, like on a 24-inch core, the last 4 inches is already pretty much as cold as it's going to get. It's not going to keep cooling it, right? And the stuff like the air that's going through the last thick 3 inches of the intercooler isn't getting fuck all for like cold air. It's already been heated up by the air coming through it, right? So
yeah, that's for this car, since you saw the intercooler. You already saw
it. Yeah, we talked about that before, how you're going to try to keep everything
totally segmented. And then what I also noticed is that intercooler is so damn heavy. And then I asked a bunch of people, and they're like, yeah, a better intercooler, it weighs way more. And I'm like,
because there's more fin density, right?
So. I'm like, what is in this? Concrete? Holy shit, this is heavy. I'm like, is that bad or good? And a couple of my friends were like, it's really good. I'm like, it weighs more than my kid. This intercooler. I'm so used to having the ones like the standard cheap one that you can just like throw it.
Yeah, like the fins are made out of tinfoil if you touch them.
Yeah, and they ting, like they sound like empty.
Yeah.
And then this one is like thud when I put it on the ground. We were running 12 flats with a single cam on BBK Uber data. Back in the early 2000s, get at me, bro. Chris Ortiz wrote. What's a BBKA? Uber data. What's that?
Oh man, Uber data. Like there was so many chips for Hondas back in the day. Like I didn't mess with any of them, but I don't even mess with, like, I didn't even buy K-Pro for my car. I just went straight to a Haltech because I was like,
I would
there's
too.
no way I'm fucking with that shit. Like,
ECU Master is actually interested in, because I've commented on a lot of their videos, and recently they're like, hey, we like what you do. We're building a Don't BS Me Volvo, actually. And I'm like, oh, wow, really? You know who I am? And then I saw
They figured out the trigger pattern for the K. That's the biggest thing. It's got like a super weird trigger pattern. So it's like a 4+1 or a 12+1 on the crank, and then a 4+1 on the intake cam, and then a 4-tooth on the exhaust cam. But then it compares the exhaust cam to the intake cam for the VVT. So like a lot of ECUs can't do it, right? That's the thing.
I saw that. So that's why I just hit them up and I was like, hey, I know you guys have plug and play K stuff. You can say no. Don't even have to answer this, but I'd like to use your ECU before I. That's what I do anymore. Because what I notice is I do stuff, and then people are like, "Oh, we would have done something with you." So
Yeah.
as much as it's weird for me to ask people, I know that they would like to ultimately. So I ask them, and they're like, "Yeah, yeah, we'd like to work with you." So I'm like, "Oh, cool," because they have a plug and play and a base solution and everything for a K. They
Yeah.
actually, I don't think they don't sell a plug and play harness, but if I get, you can buy a cleaned up K series harness. I've seen for like $240,
Yeah. They make like a Chinese tucked harness, it's
and then
called.
they make ECU Master sells adapters for a lot of cars. Because my friend, I've tuned a VR6 with it with ethanol and a turbo, and I'd never touched it before. The guy already had it running, and then another one of my friends has a R32 Skyline, and they have a patch harness for that. And then what's cool is the patch harness has extra leads for like ethanol, fuel pressure, like a bunch of stuff. So that's what's nice
Yeah.
also is they already have the leads pinned for extras. And then so I tuned both of those, and I'm like, I'd never even touched it, and I'm like, I was able to pick it up right away, and I'm like, this is pretty nice. And they have some features like live data log graphs while you're in the tune,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
don't have to.
I tuned a 2J. They actually make a plug and play 2JZ 350Z harness that like everything works, like the dash works and
Yeah,
everything.
they make really
And
cool.
yeah, I tuned that, and I wrapped my head around the software pretty quick. It's not like all colorful, like it's pretty like monotone, but it does what it's supposed to do.
It's intuitive and highly functional, in my
Yeah,
opinion, which is a
yeah,
lot of people can't even get that across.
yeah.
And then it
There's
seemed
a
to
guy
work.
actually. It's Motion Auto TV. He has a all-wheel drive Civic, and he runs it on ECU Master.
I saw
And
him,
he
and
was
then
like
he
one of the
also
first
he
people.
built like a turbo trailblazer. He had a ton of
Yeah,
issues with, and they sponsored him for that too.
yeah,
And then he was able to do like all the good stuff with that also. So I was interested in them, and then when I heard they actually give a shit about me and what I do, I was like, oh, I should hit these people up, because instead of wiring some garbage to it or trying to get Honda or something, I'm like, I should just do that. And then the harness is kind of beat up from the accident this element was in.
yeah.
So I was thinking about buying like the really cleaned up China one and then using their adapter just for fun.
Yeah, well, you might as well because that'll save you so much time, and you're
I
not
was
cutting
like, oh,
yourself
I'll
too
probably build a
much.
custom harness. And then I was looking at everything when I was stripping down the motor. And I'm like, a bunch of my connectors are broken and everything. I'm
Yeah,
like, I'm probably not going to do this now. I'll
yeah,
probably,
yeah.
then
For
that's
$235
what
for
I
these
looked up, and
harnesses.
I was like, a tucked harness is $250. So what
Yeah,
the hell am I? And that eliminates all the stuff that I'd have to cut down. And then it has the stock connectors, which the patch harness connects to.
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah,
I'm really doing myself a disservice if I don't buy all of that.
yeah. Like they weren't that cheap before. I don't know what happened. I think it's a lot. A lot of it happened even same with like the stock LS harnesses.
Yep.
Like you can get one of those for like $150 now. It's not even worth your time. But uh, they used to be like $500 like when I was building my car, and I was still contemplating it because like who really wants to use a 20-30 year old harness for doing something like
Yeah, this
this?
was beat and dirty, and a lot of the
Yeah,
connectors. I'm like, I don't want to do this.
yeah. And like even my Haltech, like my Haltech has like it's a Elite 1500 in the all-wheel drive car, and it has like the patch harness, but it's a little more focused where I actually had to separate the wires that I wanted to use for other things because on the 1500 they pretty much had everything delegated except for like 4 or 5 inputs, and I was like, well, I don't need an idle motor on this thing, and I don't need this, and I don't need evap because
So you
they
could
make it
pull
like
some stuff
totally,
back,
yeah, so they make it totally emissions legal for like evap
because
solenoid and fuel.
Australia is really bad with that.
Yeah, so I ended up just reconfiguring all that shit for the stuff that I actually wanted, like boost control and launch control and two-step and all this kind of stuff. So I just ended up separating it and just putting a Deutsch connector on it and running the wires to whatever I needed it to. So
Awesome. This says, what car would you like to see Matt build next, and what style build?
oh, I'm
Interesting.
pretty stoked about the rabbit truck.
Yep,
That
I think
like
that'll be
that we've
cool.
we've been talking about a couple different things on it, but it's definitely going to be cool. I love like I jumped into the K stuff as soon as I figured out that it was pretty much the LS stuff of the Honda world, because you can really push the stock shit really far, or you can do a built motor and do everything that way. But like, if you guys watch, there's a channel called Humble Performance. They're in Oklahoma. They push the stock K24s out of the TSX to like 600 on a dyno jet.
Wow.
And then they go and run like, they're still front wheel drive Honda, so they run 10 at like 140 or whatever. But
Yeah,
I think they've got one into the nines now. And it's just, there's one guy that I follow. He's from like southern Florida. He has an all-wheel drive EG Civic, and he just went 8s on a stock K24.
wow.
So it's like totally the same ball game of stuff. The only difference is like, it's the same as the LS stuff. The manual transmissions are made out of glass, right? So once you get over the 500-600 horsepower range, you start shredding gears and doing that kind of stuff. But
that's what I figured. Hers with like 400 will be wild.
Yeah, and it'll live forever, right? Like that's the thing. It's like, even if you pop it, you go buy a JDM K24 from one of the JDM people, and it's got the three-lobe VTEC in it. And now if you have the ECU master, you can tune all that stuff when it comes.
That's what I was really interested, because they have all of the VVT stuff already mapped, base tune, everything. Like, I just need to toss in injectors and a flex sensor, and we're really in business.
Yeah, like on the Pinto, I really wanted to run. I'm still on the fence. I was going to run it on a Terminator, but I'd have to lose the VVT. But after you see like some of the power curves that they make versus say like a B series, where you get the crazy like rising the straight line up, whereas like my car, it comes on real hard as soon as the boost hits, and then it's like a flat power curve. I really don't know if I want to give that up yet, so I might just use the Haltech on both cars and just switch it back and forth and have two different tunes, and just buy a unterminated harness and build my own harness for it. So
that's what I was thinking about, doing the same thing, like a Terminator or a Megasquirt product, because it's not something I've really used that much, and I could make a lot of settings changes. But then I'm like, do I want to lock it out and not be able to? And then I'm like, once I started,
that's the greatest thing about the K series, is having that VVT and making that mid-range power, right? Like that's what makes them superior over a B series.
Yeah, and that's what my friend with the Subaru shop was showing me, how he can retard the cam and make more boost down low, and then same thing, move the cam and then make the flat power up top. And the same thing I was thinking, like stock cam, stock everything with the K, I'd be able to do all that also. And it's not something I do ever, so it'd be cool to learn it.
Yeah.
One set of billet atomizers is easier than two sets of 210s, but you're going to be cleaning the billet atomizers every 8th mile. Do you guys not see? I mean, that's a giant joke that no one talks about, but every time James made one pass the other day, and he's like, I'm down a cylinder, I lost an injector. Like, how do you guys...
I literally left the 210s with methanol in my burnout car for 6 months, and it still fired up and ran all 8 cylinders to the point that like it was so fat that there was liquid methanol pouring out the exhaust, and I just switched it over to gas, like winterized it, and it did nothing, didn't miss a beat. Like I'm gonna check them before I start running the car again, but like I wouldn't touch an atomizer with a 10-foot pole. Like, you could give them to me, and all I would do is sell them.
And Fuel Tech has those big boys now.
Yeah.
And then Billet Atomizer's trying to sue them, and I'm like, well, if theirs work and yours don't, it's clearly not the same product. Like, how do you patent an injector? It's all a coil and a plunger, but obviously that's what they're afraid of, is theirs suck. And then everyone's not.
Well, it must have not lasted, because they're selling them again. I remember when that came up, they pulled them all down from their site and shit. And
now they made a video like a month ago highlighting them.
Yeah.
Whatever cam the hype guy is lying this month about. That's the Chris Ortiz is saying that for, I'm sure, like, what's the best cam or your favorite cam? Whatever the hype guy is lying of this month about.
Don't believe the hype.
Trick question. Oh, he says 88103 or a GT55. In my opinion, the 88103 is basically a GT55 frame.
Pretty much,
It's like a
unless
Pro
you're
Mod
like a
turbo.
legit one, right? But
Yeah, obviously, but it's so big it basically is a GT55.
yeah,
Because once you get into that like 90, 100, 101 range, like a 90 millimeter with a 101 backside, it basically is a GT55.
yeah,
He
yeah.
sells,
It's just a GT55 in a smaller housing, right? Like
yeah,
it's
he
just
sells
limited
a
by.
like a 96 110, I think, too. Something really big.
Yeah,
But that, I'd love to see a stock 6 liter with an 88 103 because I had that 80 102 and it lit that great. And man, I had it on 26 pounds and it would make still 1 pound less back pressure than intake.
yeah. That's
I
when
was
you know
like,
it's working,
damn,
right?
this thing's sick.
Yeah, my buddy Cody, he has a. I sold him a 88 103. It's a 6 liter with rods and pistons. He's going to put some trick flow 220s to keep it down, but it's in like a OBS Chev truck. The thing's rocking like for what it is. And then somebody else posted on one of the pages on like an S485 that he was going eights in a full size truck. So like I seen that and I was like, holy crap, like a beer in S485, and I was like, man, these guys are working the shit out and making the stuff fly, right? Like I've ran the 88 or the 96 wheel exhaust wheel to the limit on a few combos, and you could tell that the intake side had a little bit more left.
Yeah.
So I always thought the 103 would be wicked, right?
Yeah, and people are afraid of a turbo that big, and honestly, sometimes they work even better than getting choked by the other turbine. I never thought, like, it's funny how, yeah, like I run into a bunch of cars too that just seemingly run out of turbine. They're just done.
Yeah,
And then you're like, years ago, like you were saying, I'm laughing too because I'm like, turbine, more fuel, more turbine, more fuel. Just keep
yeah,
throwing turbine at it. People are
yeah.
like, that's too big. And I'm like, no, just more turbine, more and more.
Yeah, that theory pretty much went out the window for me when I started following this Honda stuff, and the Honda guys are running like an 85 mil exhaust wheel
Yeah,
on a
super guys
two
too,
liter,
like
right?
the super fast responding.
Yeah, like
Uh,
an 83, 85
that's what I
precision.
was
That's
just
what
saying
the
to you, like a 78, 82 and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. Like, I've thought about it over the last while, and I thought about it more of like the paddle wheel effect,
Yeah.
like like you have this nozzle that's pushing on the end of a long lever versus one that's pushing on a shorter lever. So
Yep.
less back pressure is going to drive that bigger wheel because it's farther out from the
More.
center, right?
And then what's funny is you said that is Jose Zayas from Forced Inductions told me the same thing. More torque on the shaft.
Yeah,
The distance is greater and it can spin it. I've
yeah,
noticed it too.
it's a bigger breaker bar, pretty
Yeah,
much.
I've noticed it too, where we've gone up in turbo size and increased transient and like available boost down low, and
Yeah,
I'm like, damn. Especially what really, in my opinion, also the turbines would probably be okay if everyone was still running gasoline,
yeah.
but E85 creates more exhaust gas, and then also that's why like Honda guys and everybody else have bigger turbos because they have more exhaust gas to use on ethanol.
Yeah, because you still have a certain, even on a Honda at 800 horsepower, you still have a certain, it takes a certain amount of fuel and air to make that horsepower, right?
Hmm.
So it doesn't matter if it's a Honda, you still have to get that much air and fuel out of the turbo, burnt or unburnt anyway. So it's going to drive a turbo at 800 horsepower regardless, right? So,
Oh, someone asked, this is a good one. I'll have you answer it first because I know what my answer is. The power limit of E85 before it'll stop making power. Actually, that's kind of can of worms, but before
it
it'll stop
depends
making
on how
power.
efficient the combo is, right? I
Yeah,
like,
that's. I thought it
usually you
was just
get
going
to.
to be power limit of E85, and then I read that, and I'm like, well, it's always turbine limited, in my opinion.
Yeah, like you never like I've gotten to a few combos where you get to that dead zone where it just stops picking up power on timing, but it's usually a combination of things. But like my all-wheel drive Civic made 800 wheel, right? So that's 200 wheel per cylinder
Yeah, disgusting.
of on E85 on like straight 85% content E85. But the volumetric efficiency of a 2.4 liter engine at 10,000 RPM is not the same as an LS at 7,000 RPM, right? Like, so when your volumetric efficiency is lower, NA or whatever it is, you're not going to get the efficiency out of the fuel because more of it's going to be used up to drive parts and all that kind of shit, right? But
I was gonna say, like, yeah, before it stops making power is a combination thing. That's a tricky question. But power limit of E85 is just astronomical. My dyno will read 1,500 horsepower, and I probably have 6 cars that I have pinned that on with pump E in like the 58% range.
Yeah. So it's in that same kind of ballpark of 150 to 200 horsepower per cylinder kind of thing. Like, you're thinking somewhere around there. But what's the limit? Like, either you usually run out of something else. You either run out of turbine, you run out of fuel system, you run out of whatever, right?
Humble's 2 blocks from me. Nice tiny shop. Humble knows Hondas.
Yeah, Alex seems like a okay dude. I started watching that channel when I first started getting into Hondas, and they were doing budget stuff, and I was all about that. But Honda guys are big on name brand stuff, which I don't really click with, because like I won't even buy a shirt with a Precision logo on it, let alone an actual Precision turbo. Like, the fanciest I get is Borg Warner stuff and stuff like that. But there's no way I'm buying a $4,000 turbo for my Honda, no matter what it is, just to have it blow up on me.
The 85 will go to the moon. Yeah, I mean, what I always like to do, I guess it depends on the combo also. This is why I don't see it on Turbo LS builds, but I always keep going back to that. People talk about Ignite E98 and stuff like that.
Yeah, like the race.
And they're like, it's way better than pump. I think part of it's a marketing scheme, because E85 is pump race gas, but then race gas companies are like, oh, what do we do? Well, they mix race gas in E85 and charge you $10 a gallon, and people are like, wow, what blah. And I'm like, the whole point of this fuel was to not be $10 a gallon, kids. And then I'm like, I have reached out to a bunch of people where I want to do like a pump ethanol, and I'll even water it to like 50 flat. And then I want to tune a car where it has diminishing gains, like wherever, like I'll do a bunch of pulls in a 5-degree window and show where it is, and then I would like to completely drain the fuel system dry and put in Ignite E98 and then see if it's any better at all other than using more of my fuel system.
Yeah, well, also you got to be at the limit of something to actually see the benefits of it. Right?
And that's what you were talking about. I understand if it's a bunch of import guys like Jay from Real Street, I asked him the same question, and since they're making like 300 horsepower per cylinder, it makes sense. But your average human being in a Subaru and a Turbo LS is absolutely never going to need Ignite E98.
Yeah. We used to be big on race gas because we just got E85 here like fairly recently, because one of the local stations caters to like a lot of fancy cars that they're like the Audi guys and Lambo guys are getting into E85 too. And so this little mom and pop gas station started bringing it in. But I straight up told people, I was running E98 before that from the barrel, and I told people, like, straight up, versus what a drum of C16 costs now, you can buy a set of 210s from Viren, upgrade your fuel system, and buy a 45-gallon drum of E for the same price as one drum of C16.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's just ridiculous. Like, I'd be willing to take a 10% hit. Most of the time you don't, because you're not pushed to the limit, but I'd be willing to take a 10% hit on horsepower just to save that money, where you never have to drain it. You just drive around on the shit, because it's here we pay like $1.30 a liter, which is like, what's that? Probably like $4 a gallon.
Oh, wow.
There. It's crazy expensive. It's whatever you guys are paying. Like, we pay the same for 87 as we do for E. So it's whatever that is.
What's crazy is in our area, it's $1 cheaper a gallon to go from 87 to E.
Yeah.
And it's like
if it was like that, more people
cheaper than 93.
Right? But this guy gets it specifically brought in. It's 85, like it's true E85. It tests 80 or better all the time. So I'm willing to pay it. It's still ridiculously cheaper than race gas.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a good one. I barely do any twins, so that's what's interesting to me about doing so much on my Mustang. It says, can we touch on twins? I would love some advice. So I guess like summarize, like I always say to people, twins are good if you want more power than a single. And then at some point a single turbo gets so large you can't physically fit it or the downpipe unless it's a race car out the hood. So twins are functionally, physically easier sometimes.
When I used to do a lot of LS swaps and turbo LS swaps, the big thing was that most people did it aesthetically, right? Like they wanted the twins because they wanted the somewhat symmetrical aspect to it and the look to it and stuff like that. And a lot of the time you can get a pretty, like one half of a 6-liter driving like a 62 is going to spool fairly decent, and you're not going to have the lag like you would probably have with like an 88 103 or something like that. So guys wanted like a little more peppy of a turbo setup. So that's the main thing. Like really most of the time I would try to talk people out of it and just do a single, but eventually you get to a really big single. If you're not class limited, that it gets clunky and it's hard to fit in the engine compartment and stuff like that too. So
I agree with that. This guy says they say the little E85 glass tester is not an accurate way to test. I mean, people are buying $18 ones like screen printed off eBay, and then also it's funny, people will trust a sight glass that reads higher than electronics that run the car.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, this plastic thing off eBay says this, and then my GM content sensor installed in 5 million vehicles that make them run reliably must be incorrect. But I also say to people, like, a sight glass can't tell you about like detergent and other additives. So a lot of times an ethanol content sensor is roughly 10% lower than what you would see in a shake glass. But then also the big thing there is if your fuel trims are good on 0, 25, 75, then the math is perfect. If your fuel trims are off significantly, then, and you have to work on your scale. Because from what I see, with like a whole different bunch of brand injectors and a Continental sensor and Holley's scale, which is what I always use, I'll dyno a car on pump and then dump in 10, 15 gallons of E and dyno it, and the trims are so close, all the math has to be perfect.
Yeah, for sure. We had a problem earlier this summer where they must have got some water in our E85 tank or something, because it was making everybody who wasn't on flex didn't notice a damn thing. Yeah. But everybody who was on flex, their sensor was failing.
Pegging.
It would just freak out, and then guys would drain it out, put straight pump gas in it, and it would come back, and it would just be fine. Huh. And then they'd try putting the fuel in again, and it would freak out. I'm like, well, most of the hardcore guys are just E85 all the time, but a lot of the guys with like the gauges, like the display gauges and the GMs with the flex fuel, they were freaking out about it and they were all concerned. And at the time I was just wailing on my car on the dyno making 800 horsepower, and I'm like, don't worry about it, it's fine. I'm like, it's good. It's like, I'm like, from that aspect. And they're like, well, check it with the sensor, or check it with the tube. And I'm like, well, if it's got water in it, you're not going to see it. You're adding water into it to figure out. So how are you going to tell if it's 1% off if there's 1% water mixed in with the 80% E85? And some people could wrap their head around it, but not everybody.
Yeah. And then also I've heard if you put a content sensor in 100% water, it reads 100% alcohol because it's a continuity tester.
Yeah.
Also, it reads continuity and it estimates the alcohol, but I would say that it doesn't really estimate it. It knows.
Yeah.
It's always, like I said, the math would not be good at all if it wasn't 100% accurate. So
yeah, for sure. Well, the big thing is with people who run E85s is what do you have your fail set at? Do you have it set at 85%? or do you have it set at 100% gas?
Yeah, exactly.
Like where the sensor fails. Because like if you're on E, because most of the people who go on E don't go back to pump gas.
It's just there, like we talked about, a safety net.
Yeah. Well, they don't go back to pump gas unless they get caught at a gas station where they.
Yeah, that's what I mean, for safety, like just to put garbage in it to get home.
Yeah, but then they have their fail-safe set to 100% gas, so when it does fail, the car is running 30%.
Yeah, if it's running mostly E, you want to fail to what the content is mostly, like 70%.
Yeah.
Then it'll run fine, and then the closed loop will carry the team.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I noticed like even when Garrett was doing like drag week, they were just clearing the learn table and switching between gas and E85. Once they got to the next track, they just clear the learn table, swap back to E85, and
no content sensor at all. Yeah, I've heard of Blake Hughes and those other guys years ago before I knew anything about blending and tuning and all of that stuff, where they would do the same. They would just put pump in and they just cruise nice and let the learn do it.
Yeah. I love the Holly learn stuff. Like I do stupid shit all the time with fast. 3Q pumps.
That's what, once I learned that, I was like, this is worth, because there was no cheaper one. I did a Dominator right away in my car. And once I figured out how fast it was and has the long-term table and stuff, I was like, man, this is worth way more than I spent.
Yeah. Literally, like I was doing, like I did the 3 AM 380 thing and shit like that. And one pump would be always failing and doing dumb shit. And we got 300% duty cycle and all this kind of shit. And it saved my ass enough times that I didn't even bother. Like I really treated that stock bottom N53 pretty bad. And I just let it roll with it. I was like, everybody's like, well, why don't you put the safety in? I'm like, well, I could. I have fuel pressure and all that kind of stuff, but why? I'm like, I'm trying to go fast here. So
yeah, it'll knock you down. Yeah, and it's the same thing with guys that do. I've had friends do nitrous kits where they have like 6 of the safeties and like a fuel pressure switch. Well, when you hit a big nitrous kit off the rail, it does yank your fuel pressure.
Yeah.
And then it shuts the kit off, and then the kit's so pissed that it never turns back on.
Yeah.
So
then you're scrambling trying to figure out what the fuck it's doing.
Yeah, you have 8 mechanical micro switches firing your stuff in line, and none of them work. Oh, Kyle's on here. He says, Team Canada, I'm the closed loop cowboy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do the same. I think that's one thing that Joe Simpson and I disagree on, is he likes to tune completely open loop and then make the closed loop like fairly tight, I think, like 10%. And I'm just like 50, 100% cowboy also. Because
it's great till something happens.
In my experience, it will completely save your ass. And then
totally.
The only downside is some people seem to kill O2 sensors all the time. Unplug it. Just unplug it and it'll stop trimming excessive amounts.
Yeah.
I've seen that too, where someone has like a stock ECU and they're like, it keeps trimming everything. I'm like, unplug them. Unplug the damn things.
Yeah.
Can I do that? Yeah, throw them in the trash.
Yeah.
Just unplug them till you get somewhere so it's not trimming 75% out.
Yeah, I haven't lost an O2 sensor yet.
I never have either. I don't know what to tell people. I use
the Honda Odyssey NTK ones from whatever part store, right?
Oh, is that an actual NTK?
I have an actual NTK on one bank, and then I have a Holly one on the other.
Oh, okay.
I figured out so I have instead of the resistor that comes with the Holly, I put a little trim pot. So I just, when I put a brand new sensor in, I just trim it to the other bank.
Oh,
to get the resistance
for your Dominator,
right?
for the twins.
Yeah.
Oh.
Because I really couldn't swallow buying a second sensor.
$257 US, I think.
Yeah,
probably more now.
Now there's that Mad Racing Parts. He sells them for a little bit. He makes them himself, but I figured it out.
Can you run a mechanical fuel pump on the street? I mean, people do, but it makes so much more sense in any kind of long-term driving to have like a 255 or a 400.
Yeah,
and then putting on, like, Cameron's gonna knock his belt off. Like everybody does that. They take the belt off and they run on the EFI pump.
Yeah. Even with like the bigger Magnafuels and stuff that aren't meant to run consistently, if you run some smaller pump with a like an AEM with a check valve and then have that one, and and the other one. That's pretty much as far as I would go with like dual pumps now. Like
What I've always
I
wanted to do is PWM one of those because Magnafuel says you can.
yeah, oh, I don't doubt it. Like it's just a basic electric motor, right? So
Some of them, like I've PWM'd some Walboros and heard them.
yeah.
So I'd like
Well,
to know.
your resistance, your amperage goes way up when you pulse width them. So
Yeah, so I don't know how to. Maybe it's a frequency issue that I had, or a minimum duty cycle, or both. I don't know. New brushless pumps are fantastic, Kyle just said. So that's
yeah.
what I did is I pulled my brushless out of the G because I'm going to put a single brushless in my Mustang and see how, because I think that pump is severely underrated.
Oh
So
yeah, there's guys running the 10.0 on methanol and making like wicked power on it. I was
on the
debating
VR1,
that.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to put one in my. I pulled it out of my G. I want to put it in my Mustang and see if I can make 1300 with the single pump. Because the big one there is there's no flow loss up to 130 psi.
Yeah, I noticed that about the graph on them.
So if you start at 80 with 210s and you run 30 pounds of boost, like your injector is now a 400-pound injector. Like
Yeah.
it starts to get insane at some point. So yeah, I think I don't think I would even run out because part of me wanted to do a surge tank on this because Brad from Snake Eater sent me 3 of his 415s, Bosch
Yeah.
415s, and I've never done a surge, so I thought, why don't I do a surge and then run on one and then. But then I'm like, man, I've made 800 plus on E85 with this stupid brushless. I should just put that in, and then I will know the answer because people think the brushless pump's expensive until you have 6 pumps and a tank and a surge and a,
Yeah. Like,
and then the brushless, you could probably do what I almost wish they would do, which is too hard for most people to fathom. They have the single line that you can turn the second stage on and off.
yeah.
So people make expensive ass controllers like Deutschworks and Teachworks and some other places, and TI Automotive. It's like $1 million for the pump and controller because you have to PWM them and set all sorts of stuff up. Holly was pretty smart, and they took like their 6010 box and it has 2 settings, high and low.
Yeah.
It's super easy. So I would like for them to have a high-low switch and then maybe a PWM one where you could just turn it up slowly if you wanted to. Because I've noticed on a bunch of cars, it's funny, when that second stage hits, if you do it too early, you get like an additional 10 pounds of fuel pressure early. Like it can't even return it, I've noticed. So I turn it on later and later to get rid of the spike. But
like a fire hose.
I think that it can be, it's...
I thought about doing one of those pumps if I did methanol on the Chevette, just because it would simplify not having the front surge tank and stuff. It's just the price is a hard pill to swallow for that 10.0. Like it's just.
Yeah.
I was gonna just wait a bit and make sure they were pretty proven, which they seem to be. I want to see a few more guys run them on methanol and then.
Yeah, what's funny is Ortiz got I think a 5.0 for something, and they sent him like 2 or 3 bad ones in a row.
Yeah.
And then like the circuit board was cooked. Like right out of the box, he opened the one in the same issue that it had from the other one, and he actually hit them up, and they actually partially admitted that they had a bad batch. They wouldn't outright say it, but yeah, I'm going to try just the one, and it would be cool to make all that power with the one. And then I've showed people, I'm like, this is thinner than a 255. It's a little bit longer, but it's small. It can fit like so easily in a lot of things. This guy says Aeromotive 5.0 GPM sounds amazing when it's sucking air. China fuel pumps are an awful idea. You have no idea how many people I've had with like 5 255s. What a joke. Like just the
it
VR.
Seemed like a great idea. It seemed like a great idea in the beginning, and then you realize you're just like juggling.
They're like,
things.
they're only $50 a piece. I'm like, how did you even get that many in there?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, a 450 is $100. A real 450 is $100.
The new I'm not a huge fan of the new AEM inlines like the 044s. Like their quality has definitely gone downhill.
All of them.
Since
the
we
Bosch.
First started.
6 years ago they were bad. So
yeah,
now they're
like
not
it's
any
just
better.
Now, when they switched from calling them 380s to 400s, I swear they switched whoever was making them.
Yep.
And then they've just kind of gone downhill. Now Holly owns them, so Can't talk too much trash.
Yeah, but the brushless is only like $480.
Yeah.
And if you, I mean, I think it'll outflow a 4303, so consider that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little bit more for the Holly one, but it's tiny and it's in tank and it's quiet and it's adjustable, built-in adjustable speed. Anyway, yeah, I would have never considered to even talk about one of those until they sent me one to use, and I'm like, holy shit, this is amazing. And it is cheaper than multiple pumps, and it is easier than doing hanging 6 pumps in a thing and wiring it, and relatively the gauge of the wires are small, and I mean everything.
Then at least when you're having problems, if you do end up having problems, you only have to diagnose one pump. Also,
One pump.
Right? You're
Not that
like,
I usually have issues with 2 or 3 450s, but I think these will outrun all of that with less current flow, and then 450s nose over above 60, 75 pounds.
yeah, they're not a high pressure deal.
So that's what someone was asking earlier, I think, but they were asking about fuel pressure. But in-tank pumps are incredible, but if you cannot go high pressure, they nose on fuel flow very fast at high pressures.
Yeah.
That's why on my even on my truck, I had 2 10s and 3 450s. I set the base pressure to 30 pounds, and it still ran fine because I thought I might run 30 and then I'd be at 60 where they start nosing.
Yeah, the biggest thing I've learned with multiple pumps, it's kind of like twin turbos. Is like you get one pump, it's 400 liters. Putting 2 pumps isn't 800 liters.
Nope.
You get like another half.
Yeah.
And then you add a third pump, and it's another quarter of that. Like you're not doubling the fuel flow every pump because every pump has to fight the fuel pressure of the other pump, right? So you're not doubling your fuel flow. So if you got one pump that's 800 liters per hour and you got 2 pumps that's 400 each, the 800 is going to be leaps and bounds above 2 400 liter per hour pumps,
Yeah.
right? Like because they're all trying to fight through the same hole, right? So it's the same as having 2 turbos supplying 20 pounds of boost into one pipe. They're going to be fighting each other against each other versus one turbo that can do the same power, right?
Yeah, I mean that's what we talked about with my twin turbo kit, where you're like, hey, if you can segment everything, you'll make way more than. And I'm like, oh, that's a really good, thing to think about. So that's why I did. That was it's like an 1100 horsepower intercooler that I bought, but it was a Blem, and I got it for $5.99.
Nice.
And
that thing's going to make wicked power because those turbos make good power anyways, and when they're not going to have to be fighting each other, it's going to be wild. I'm pretty stoked to see what that thing's going to end up doing.
I bet it makes retarded. I'm going to have to put like a 2-pound spring in it because I bet it makes out like. And
they're going to light faster. They're going to go farther. They're going to come on harder, and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to do the. That's why I chose all like the stroker, but stock bore, so I'd have more cylinder head on it. And then I did these turbos, and then I knew I wanted, because I could have got big turbos and just gone absolutely insane. But I'm like, I've built some good peak power cars, but it'd be cool to have a car that makes like 1,000 average almost everywhere.
Yeah. And you got the rods for it too,
that's
right?
why,
so you don't have to worry about bending shit.
I can use the bottom end is what's really going to be interesting. And then Hunter has 6262s on his car, and he's like, they light at like 1800 RPM, and it makes almost unusable power early.
Yeah.
They're so insane. And I think on his like 3rd pass, he was already well into the 8s with the damn thing. And I'm like, yeah, that's, I want to.
Yeah, I did like GT35Rs back in the day on a 6-liter, and it was ridiculous. Like it was in like a 4,000-pound truck, and I couldn't believe how we had to pull a bunch of power out to not bend the rods
in the middle. Yeah,
but it was just ridiculous. Like it was just like the ultimate street. It only like we had it like 600 wheel on 10 pounds, but
it was
Like
everywhere.
the ultimate street truck, right? Like
one of Cameron's first combos was a 5.3 with 235s. And it made huge broad power. It went 980s, 970 with that combo, and it made 880 on my dyno. But yeah, it was everywhere.
Yeah,
you could roll in, and they were just ready to party all the time. Where's another? Oh. I suffered an engine bay fire over the summer and the O2 sensor survived. Shielding at the sensors all melted away and it's still kicking.
I got one like that too. My Mini caught fire on the first burnout at LS Fest. The valve cover leaked onto
nice.
onto the O2 sensor and caught the plug. So that is like a permanent. I have like a Haltech methanol wideband in that car. Not that I have time to look at it, but the plug is just one piece where it connects together. It's all just one little ball.
It still works though, right?
Oh yeah.
That's funny.
I put a valve cover gasket in it, but we never bothered with the O2 sensor.
Yeah, it runs, so who cares?
Yeah.
Oh, someone says, people ask this all the time, no more Megasquirt love. It's just now that the $1,000 Terminator exists.
For LS stuff, I say no. The great thing about micro squirts and mega squirts is like you can run anything on them. So
yeah,
like,
of course. If you're a tinkerer and you need something that no one else supports, absolutely. Yeah. And I do it. I still put them on stuff. Like I did a Honda Grom with a micro 6 years ago or something.
Yeah.
And you can't put a Holly on a Grom. Like
no.
You cannot. And then
like
custom
all you need is a 36-1 wheel, and you can run anything on Waste Spark and Batch Fire on a micro skirt for $400. Like I mean, you can attach the trigger wheel, you're set.
Yeah, my Grom had like a stock VR sensor that I was able to just easily hook up, and then I didn't want to do a complex like a BIP 373 for my stock coil, whatever dummy coil it had.
Yeah,
a CD box or whatever you want, a CD coil.
Yeah.
So I put an LS coil on the stupid thing. I had one laying around, and then I noticed at like 5800 it would go over voltage and lose sync, so I put like a 10K on it, and then I enabled like I did dumb stuff with it. Like I did a clutch in to do a 2-step, so you could do wide open shifting also and launch it. And you could do, I mean, just a $300 micro for that stuff is incredible.
It's a science project. That's what I always tell people. I'm like,
if you like to mess around,
make something run that wasn't supposed to run on that thing, it's great. But if you're trying to make peak power, I struggled for 2 years with my Chevette with the MS3 that I had on it, and then I never figured out what it was, and I just switched to a Holly and picked up 10 miles an hour and said never again, right?
Yeah, and then it's just drop in, and then the closed loop fuel, getting the car to run and getting decent fueling is 90% of DIY people's issues, in my opinion. Yeah. So a car with that, like you can do we call it Game Boy tune. I don't know if you heard me say that, where you're like beep boop, and the car runs. Like I've had people I've had people Game Boy a car. I've probably said this 30 times if people actually listen to all of this. I've had people Game Boy a car and drive it to the dyno and say, man, it's never run this good. And they chose internal map sensor, and they have a 3-bar, and they loaded like a tune. They chose the injector anywhere near the size. It was fine, but they have a flex sensor and everything. So it's running on E. It has like everything wrong. It has no map signal. And they're like, it drove great.
Yeah. And then the learn table is just the one cell at 90 kPa or 100 kPa back and forth.
They're like,
I had a guy drive to the dyno 3 hours away to my dyno and
in the car.
On a NA Terminator. And it was just the one, he had the wrong map sensor, and it was just the one.
Same thing. 90
kPa, because that's what our elevation is.
Yeah.
And it was just back and forth. And he's like, yeah, it drives pretty good. I'm like, it's not even map sensoring.
No, I thought probably 5 times. And then I've had other people, I've never even had them on the dyno. They built a similar combo, put in like SEP 1500s, loaded my base tune with the same pinouts for flex and everything. And it's actually a friend of the guy that bought 8s for 8, has a 4th gen with a trans brake, a TH400 and everything in it. And they did an integrated Terminator install. They took my base tune, loaded it with the handheld, made a hit or two with it. He asked me if I would look it over because they were going to race at a track the next day. I looked it over. Fuel trims were pretty close. I touched up 2 or 3 things. I said, okay, make another hit or two. Well, then he sends me a time slip like 12 hours later of it going like a 940. I'm like, but it's kind of one of those things, the Holly take the wheel thing. Like you can't do that with those other systems.
No.
And the software is nowhere near as friendly, and it's just so many of the things. Like, can you data log? Does it come with a handheld Does it come with a touchscreen? Does it come with basically a dash all in one, and a wideband, and a drop-in harness, and the ECU, and like if you're clueless, someone can talk to you over the phone and tell you how to make a log, how to send the files, and then if you can put the card back in and load the updated files, you go boop boop. You don't even have to have anything. Like the only way they can make it better is if they put a GSM card in the damn handheld, and people could like phone dial you, like hotspot you, and do it all for you live while you're driving. Built-in team viewer, yeah. Like there's it can't even be any easier.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Like out of all the things that no other platform can touch it based off of features and price wise. Like it's just,
the handheld.
I get guys with NA cars. They come after 2 months of driving the car around. They're like, oh, I just want to kind of see what it does and see if you can touch it up. And sometimes they got settings wrong, and that's all you really end up doing is you change a few settings so it idles and doesn't stall. And
yeah,
stuff that they probably wouldn't even notice or got used to because they drove a carb before.
Yeah, no, they're all happy because it's not a carb and it's not a HP Tuner's car that's so far off it won't start.
Yeah, it's great. Like I love it. Like it's just the user friendliness of it and the ability to and I think a lot of it now too, that especially like Holly's been around for a while, but the Terminators is the community. Because if you're looking to do something, somebody else has already done it.
Yeah.
Right. Where sometimes like I use like other platforms and the community isn't there, and you're trying to get an answer of how to do, say, like time-based boost control or something like that. People think they don't know because they've never done it, right?
Yeah.
And you can't get a response back from like the manufacturer and stuff, and you're just sitting there pressing buttons till you figure out how you get it to work because there's nobody to help you. Whereas like you ask on the Holly page, you ask on Sloppy, you ask somewhere, Boosted, LSX, or whoever, and somebody will answer it for you because they've done
it. LOL GSM card would be amazing. Yeah, maybe they should do that next. But I mean, the system is so good. If you don't lie to it, it's really good. The other thing too is if you go on an event, 80% of the people have Holly or more. So if you need help or a part or someone to help you do one thing or anything, like all the drag week cars have it, and there's a reason for all that too.
A big thing too was like when they first came out with like the HB was like one of the first ones, and they didn't have a lot of stuff figured out in the beginning because like they didn't even figure out the LS coil thing when they first came out with the LS kits. You had to use those waste spark coils off like the 3800 Buicks and shit.
I wasn't ever on board that early.
Yeah, like I know people who were like on board from pretty much the beginning, and because I came from like the Holly Commander days when I had it on my 2.3,
I've heard about that.
I was even before that, so they didn't really have it figured out that way. And then the other thing is everything was proprietary, right? Like you couldn't use some random fuel pressure sensor or some random. You had to kind of buy everything from Holly for everything to work.
Yeah, single scaling.
They didn't have drop downs for everything like they do now. So they've kind of realized they're making the money off the ECU. We can give out a little bit more information. Like it used to be, you had to have Holly injectors and Holly coils and Holly this and Holly that. And that's when it was like, it's still not the cheapest, but it's the most user friendly now that you can still figure things out and use oil pressure sensors from Low Dollar or whoever, right? But
oh man, Chris Ortiz says I'm coming up on 4 hours to find my luggage.
Shit.
We got someone donating money here. Is it normal for a drive-by-wire 5.3 sloppy stage 2 to smell like raw fuel, even at idle if the wideband? Yeah, I mean, injector phasing would probably fix a lot of that. If it's a pump gas car and it has no cats, it's just gonna stink.
I think that's the hardest thing people have to understand, that like if you don't have a cat, it's
gonna smell terrible.
There is still fuel in the exhaust. That's what your O2 is measuring, right? Like you're still gonna have that smell, and the less efficient your engine is, the worse it's gonna smell. Like
it's tough to phase with HP tuners though. Holly has a stupid calculator in it to do it. It's so easy. Just more Holly banter, how easy they make
Oh,
everything.
Alan from Skid Factory's on.
Who's that?
Alan.
Oh, yeah, he just did. I just see that now. Wonder if they have any new episodes. I didn't get to look today. I was rushing around all day, and then Ortiz, like, once an hour is like, they canceled my other flight. They canceled this flight. My luggage is in Philadelphia. Like, I'm like, oh, man.
And he's off for a week anyway, so he's...
And then we went and got ice cream with my little guy. And then since we're not doing, sadly, like, we were going to do stuff with Chris tomorrow. So I have people that wanted to get on the dyno, but I only did one morning thing. But now that's, I was like texting a bunch of people, like, do you still want to get on? Because my son.
I'm like that too. I have a bunch of people pretty much on call. I usually give.
They're waiting. I have people waiting. Yeah, a bunch of my friends. Like, I'll schedule 1 or 2 randos if I even have time anymore. And then a bunch of my friends are like, I changed everything, or it's dog shit, and then they want to come back and see if it's not dog shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, what external fuel pump do you guys? I don't really like externals, but a 4303 is my favorite.
Yeah, for like something that's like you're gonna drive a lot of 4703 or 4303. I just bought a 4703 for the Chevette. But
is that a bigger one?
That's the bigger one without the cooling. Like, it's just like almost like a mechanical pump with a motor on it.
Oh, yeah. It doesn't run through the body.
No, so it's not cooled. So you're only supposed to run it like half an hour at a time. So I just kind of got tired of the multiple pump thing, so that's what I bought. It's good for a little bit more than a 4303.
I've done a bunch of cars with a 4303 that make like 1050, 1100 through an auto on ethanol. If people are trying to keep count.
On my dyno, they run out at about 900-ish. Like, my dyno's pretty stingy. But I kind of like the couple cars that I've had around that kind of ran out of everything all at the same time. They ran out of turbo, they ran out of injector, and they ran out of fuel pump all at the same time. So we kind of just did that. Gave up all at the same time. Turbo.
Oh, nice. Al just said Fairlane upgrades coming this week. 9-inch TH350 drive-by-wire, Elite 2500, no Hollies. Well, you guys are in Australia. I'm sure it would be different for us if we were there too.
Yeah, I'd be like, I have an Elite 1500 on my all-wheel drive Civic, and I need to phone a friend sometimes because I've been trying to get the time-based boost or timing control off of my 2-step working, and I haven't been able to get it to work. I want it to lock 10 degrees out of it. I haven't been able. I'm going to have to send something into Holly in the new year once I get it running again, because I really would like that to. I think that was the main reason I bought it over having the Platinum that I had in the car. But
this guy says, imagine TSA Googling Chris Ortiz. There are so many people named Chris Ortiz that I doubt they would ever tie sloppy mechanics to Chris Ortiz. I remember one time he was being a jerk to somebody and they're like, I'm going to look you up, or, like dox you or something. He's like, good luck finding a brown guy with the name Chris Ortiz on the internet. It's like, fine. It's like, yeah, it's literally just going to say, look up John Smith. A white guy named John Smith. Let me know how you do. 70 million results found.
Yeah.
480,000 results on criminal records for John Smith in your town. Are external self-priming, or they all have to be gravity-fed? A little bit of both. Some of those really powerful pumps can do suction very well, but if you're using them for suction, they don't have as good a feed. And the easier you feed those, a lot of those, like MagnaFuel says, like, give the thing 1.5 inch feed, because it'll pump better too.
Yeah, it just needs once it's primed, it just needs everything it can get, right? So
Challenger RT stock quarter mile starting to smell like puke after a run. Probably the cats. I love that when someone floors it up a hill in front of me in a stock car, and I'm like, woo, catalytic converters.
Aren't those new ones are all wideband in those new Dodges anyway, so I don't know.
A lot of the new cars, yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. And my Subaru friend makes fun of me. He's like, we've had wideband since like '01. I'm like, yeah, head
Yeah,
guys get problems
Honda's
since
like that
'88.
too.
Yeah, I noticed that too, where people are like, buy the Honda Pilot is a cheaper 4.9.
Yeah, like I have on my dyno, I have a Ballinger AFR 500
Yep.
wideband, and that's the same one I use. The O2 is the sensor is the same one I use on to trick the Holly on my car, and it's like $99. It's like a 2005 Honda Odyssey, and it works great. Like, especially when you know you're going to probably kill them if somebody chucks a rod or something like that, versus a lab grade NTK or something that's $300 or $400. Like, they're not that much of a difference.
Yeah, similar. I forget what I was going to say. Something I had to add to that. I can't remember. This guy says Dario has private parking at his junkyard.
Well, the Ginger Brief Express is my buddy Tony with the broken Turbo 400 in the C5, so he's been dying for attention. So he says highest horsepower ever on Dario Dyno, which was like 1200 something.
Huh.
He knocked the strap off of a BR7 on a turbo car. So
wow, never done that. Good job.
Yeah.
What do I think about the new Z06 motor? I think it's cool as hell. It's a shame you can't tune those cars. Maybe one day.
Yeah. I follow what's his name from Fuel Tech.
Anderson,
yeah.
I want to have him on.
Seems like a really smart guy.
Oh yeah, he's definitely sharp. And I mean, I know what they're doing is they're just using like a very high grade math translator, right? They're just taking stuff and then translating it. And it's amazing what they're doing. They're definitely the best right now because they're Did you watch the video where he runs an 890?
I haven't watched it yet.
It's doing this thing in high gear. It's like rear, and I'm like, man, what is that? My brain wants to know what that sound is. It does really good. It actually wheelies in first. It launches great, and it hits the shift so hard. He's like flying in his seat. But then that last shift and that last gear hold, it is struggling. Something is struggling for sure. And I want to be like, what is that?
Yeah, I kind of figured they were piggybacking it or something off of. They probably just have the coils and whatever the injectors.
Something. Yeah. Something. Oh, people keep. Yeah, I have reached out to Brent and Anderson at Fuel Tech and Nelson from Nelson Race Engines. I've reached out to a bunch of people like that. Like Cletus, he was actually able to make it the one day, broke his trans, was like an hour or two late to the show. And then he was so beat from like dealing with that all day. I felt bad but he like wanted to commit. So I admire him for that. But he was like, we were like an hour in and he's like, I'm going to go have some cookies. I'm like, get out of here, dude. Go to bed.
Yeah, I caught that one. He's a cool guy. I've met him and I've met Brent and Jamie from PFI. They always go to LS Fest because they go to some off-road race right after somewhere in Vegas.
Oh, nice.
So he's always down there visiting at the time, Garrett, before they did their Florida thing, right? But
Brent said he would. Cool. He said he would. I asked him like on Facebook and on his YouTube channel and a bunch of other stuff, but I haven't been able to get a hold of him after that. I don't even know how I would. I tried messaging him.
I think he's all over the place now. They're trying to live in Florida and stuff.
Of course, yeah.
I don't blame them.
Yeah, no kidding.
Right?
Everybody.
It's like the YouTube hotspot mecca of racing.
Why the hell not? Everybody moved to Bradenton.
Well, where else are you going to get content? Like if you're a dedicated YouTuber, where else are you going to get content?
And then, right? All the other states and stuff are just trash canning people on restrictions and then car stuff and everything. They're just getting shit on in all directions.
Yeah.
And well, anyway, those guys are just hard to nail down, obviously, respectably. And then even Kyle from 1320 was like, he's like, maybe in 6 months when my schedule isn't so booked. I'm like, holy shit.
You got to hit them up on like 2 days after like Christmas or something. They probably was the
Yeah,
lucky
and then
day.
I'm like, I don't want to. I'm not really crawling up their asses. So I felt
No.
bad. I was. Tom Nelson always emails me back when I email him funny stuff or I talk to him on Instagram. And then for a while there, he wouldn't get back to me. And then he made that post about losing his brother. And I'm like, what a jerk I am. So I'm like, I don't ever want to ask him for a radio show ever again. I feel like, oh, what's a good IAT to pull on pump? I mean, I guess I would say it depends on the delta, but yeah, around 200 you want to start pulling. But that's not even a good estimate in my opinion, because Cameron's car would slow down significantly when we started yanking at 175, and we
Yeah.
eventually zeroed that bitch, and it went faster and faster with like 240-degree inlet temps.
Well,
So
and then also it's your AFRs too, right? Like if you're using the fuel, if you're running the thing in the tens, you're going to use the fuel to help cool the charge, anyways.
yeah,
With
it's all of the above. You might even want to do an air fuel offset, that if it starts to get hot, to just change the commanded air fuel, and
yeah,
then
yeah, and I bet you it would help. I run my shit pretty fat, like probably like high tens, low 11s on my car because my IATs suck too. But I've never really, I haven't got enough hits on the car to say that it's beneficial to pull timing or not. I got a safety net over 180 degrees, I think. But other than that, I just let it eat.
what we did on his also a few times was we're spraying dry to keep the actual inlet down, and then we were so far into the turbine that spraying dry would slow it down.
Yeah,
Lowering boost went faster with spray, and then vice versa. Right at that limit,
yeah,
and inlet temps didn't seem to matter at all. We changed everything but inlet temps at that point. And actually, we did a post like right after the turbo, so turbo outlet temperature, and that is obnoxiously high. So the intercooler is working fantastic. The delta is really good
yeah,
because on the few passes at the 8th mile, it was pegging the sensor at like 300 degrees, 302,
yeah. I think people don't understand actually how hot the air is that comes out of the turbo,
until they
right? Like,
melt one of those couplers. It turns into bubble gum.
yeah, like people like we we dabble. My friend Tomo is really good with the math side of tuning, and he figured like back in the day when like the drag radial stuff was getting big, when guys were running 70 pounds of boost on a big block with twin 88s, like the outlet temp was 700 degrees, right? like like because it's all math, right? Like some guys are better at the math part of it, and my friend Toma is just amazing at it,
They have an
and he'll
EGT
like,
probe for an IAT sensor.
yeah, and that's what they were doing right before any of this fancy stuff. But what are you gonna do with that, right? Like you're just using the methanol to cool everything anyway, so you're just fire hosing it in there.
FMU. Anything else here, boys? Melting the aluminum intake tube from IATs. Well, that they probably had significant intake structure on those cars.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but it's funny, like the more data I look at now, the funnier some situations are. And there's that whole the more you know you don't know happening every
Yeah.
time.
Oh yeah, for sure. I like it's just I try to learn everything I can, but man, like some of the stuff, some of these guys that have been doing it, like my buddy Toma bought a dyno in 1999, like he's been tuning forever, so he had to learn it all himself because the internet was even pretty virgin at the time, so he really didn't have a choice. He just figured it out, right? So I messaged him one day and I told him I was out of an injector, and he's like, "There's no way you can be out of injector." He's like, "What boost are you running?" He asked me a couple questions. He's like, "You should be at 6.3 milliseconds at 7,000 RPM." And I look it up on my data log, and I'm like 6.25 milliseconds on my data log. And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm out of injector." He's like, "You have 210s though." I'm like, "No, I have 140s." He's like, "Oh, he's like, "Yeah, you're totally out of injector." Like,
Yeah, anymore I run into that too, where people are like, they were like running out of 1000s, and they're like, I need to get 1500s or 210s, and I'm like, how much power are you making? And they're like, it's like way under the injector limit. I'm like, yeah, that's not your injector. Injector isn't going to fix it. It's probably going to exacerbate it because it's spraying too much earlier and draining your rails or supply, which is obviously the issue. Oh, that's a good one. How high have you revved your Honda? Because it was, I think you bought pistons and rods now, but when it was totally stock.
Purpose or?
Oh yeah, I know you money shifted it once, right?
Yeah, I money shifted it this year. I went 121 on the dog box, and the data log read 14,000.
So that's technically the highest you've revved it, but it didn't survive.
But yeah, I had the limiter at 98, and I hit it a bunch of times. So it's been 98 consistently, but it makes power up there. Like it made peak power at 9,400.
Insane.
And I think with like a little bit of a cam, I'm going to go a little bit bigger on the cam and a little more efficient of an intercooler. It'll probably make power right to 10.
So is it cammed? Is it stock cams?
No, it's aftermarket cams.
Okay. I was going to say, man, that's high for...
Stock cams will do like 9,000.
Ooh, that's disgusting.
Yeah.
Makes me want to do a 6262 on Jamie's car immediately and like never be able to use it though.
Yeah.
Not for what that is. It doesn't need that for her to putz around in. The non-intercooled 400 wheel would probably be incredible. I mean, I said to her, like, we can intercool it later, when we actually want to throw a clutch and some boost and everything else at it. But probably, I mean, the front end's so small, I'm like, I don't think any of it's going to be really worth it. Especially it's going to have E85 and be under 10 pounds most of the time. No way.
Yeah, oh yeah, it'll be.
What's this guy? Someone, Josh, donated money. He says, I pulled an S475 off my 4.8 and replaced it with an 88 103, but only made 3 pounds on the trans brake. I'd like 8 or so. What could I do? Oh, well, your converter and a bunch of things. 100 shot dry would definitely help you out, but it depends on your RPM and tune-up and everything else.
If you can get to 3 pounds, I think you really just need a few more tweaks. Like, we run like pretty ridiculous timing on the trans brake, and I've found with like a lot, like I have twin S369s on a 5.3, so I've learned a lot about spooling and stuff. So it's not uncommon. Guys get scared, but like at 1 or 2 pounds of boost, you can run 28 to 30 degrees of timing on the trans brake.
Yeah, it's basically motor.
Boost.
Yeah.
Just
people get scared once it hits 1 psi.
Yeah, like you don't have to pull timing until 7 pounds of boost, right? Like especially if you're on like E85 or something.
He's on E.
Yeah, so like you could run. You're not going to hurt it. If you run too much, it's just not going to work as fast. Devin Vanderhoof has a really good video on setting up. If you look on his YouTube, he has a really good video on how to set it up doing that.
Yeah, after like a
log
advanced boost builder.
How fast it gets to target.
Yeah.
Not even to target, just to like 3 pounds of boost. And then you know if you're on the right track of if it wants more timing or less. You put 28 degrees in it. If it takes 0.5 of a second to get up to the target, or not even target, to like 1 pound of boost, and then you put 30 in it and it takes 0.3 of a second, you know you're on the right track, right?
Yeah,
so he has a really good video on that one.
And I would say that similarly, you're not going to hurt it because that's just like pushing for diminishing gains on a dyno.
Yeah,
it's not going to gain if it's not liking it, it's not going to like it.
No, that's for sure. It doesn't mean because 30 works, 35 is going to work better, right? Like there is a point where it's not going to work, but usually if you keep it at like whatever you're comfortable with, 12.5, 13.0 air fuel, and run it at like 30 degrees, because it's just a really efficient, up to a few pounds of boost. It's just a really efficient NA motor, right? So you can run it right up and just drive that converter as hard as you can to get it up on the boost.
I'd say also, like, I'm assuming he's foot braking it, and then also how good are your brakes? A lot of people skip a lot of those steps, but sometimes they have trash brakes and they just push, or they have skinnies on for no reason and they push the skinnies.
Yeah,
all of the above. And then if you really want to do something interesting, if it's an 80E, it is an 80E on a Terminator, do the sloppy trans brake and force it into third.
Yeah.
That'll get it way up. Mechanical advantage is going to go into the shitter, and you can foot brake it way up.
Yeah.
And then, this guy says, what's your opinion on the Jegs some part number XHD? They're both amazing.
That's I think the 60429 is the normal low stall one.
That's what he's saying. Yeah, for high horsepower, that's the best.
Like that converter is made by Transmission Specialties. We bought it years ago, and then Transmission Specialties, I guess they just really didn't want to deal with the public as much anymore for that kind of stuff. So they ended up, I think, subletting them out to Jegs or something. So now it's just a Jegs converter. And we went 840 at 160 in a 3,200 pound box body with a box stock S480. Right, they worked really wicked. We've used them on a couple other cars. Some cars work better than others, but like you can't beat it for the price. You get it on sale for like $329.
Yes.
It holds 800 horsepower. Right?
At the same time, I saw there was a sale. Someone on Sloppy Private posted that there was a coupon code, and I immediately called and yelled at Mitch and Brett to buy them. So they both got the converter for $327 shipped, and then they're both running 8s.
Yeah.
In 3,000 pound cars, 3,200 pound cars. You absolutely can't beat it. I love when someone shows up and they're like, Jegs XHD, TH400, Terminator, whatever, and I load a tune, and I hit it, and it makes 650 on the first hit, and it has like 10% fuel trim, and I'm like, this is what it's all about, guys. You want to make your life easy?
Yeah, and like once you wear that thing out, like we had a decent amount of converter slip at like 160 miles an hour, but after that, like you're into the territory where you should be buying probably a little bit better of a converter. But if you can get to bottom 8s on a $300 converter,
it's disgusting what you can do with that $300.
Yeah.
There's nothing better. Oh, it's 500 now. It's probably because of materials. Everything's been flying up. Like the last month or two, it's getting pretty disgusting. The amount of people tell me every now and then, they're like, I'll say what something cost 5 months ago, and someone's like, oh, it's $1 million now. I'm like, son of a bitch. Like if you can't get it, you're paying for it. That's just a thing. There's nothing you can do about it right now. Oh, he says he has a trans brake on the 4L80. I mean, honestly, if you're making 3 pounds on a 4.8, and I mean, what kind of RPM is that? Maybe he can fill us in. If you're making 3 pounds on a 4.8 with that turbo at a lower RPM, it's pretty incredible. And then also, very easily, you could spray it, like the nitrous settings in a Terminator. There's a shutoff thing you can check that says turn off, and you can enter a boost amount. So you could tell it to shut off at like 10 pounds and clear the hump if you want to leave on like 14, but...
like I have no problem using nitrous to spool stuff. Like it's like the easy way out, but who cares, right? It's easier on parts, better than sitting on the trans brake for
boiling it down, absolutely. Or
trying to get it to spool, right? So
like if it's that terrible. Oh, he says he has Squirrel Tune map. Hit up Jack Roberts there and give him $50 to help you out or something. And then, give it a little whiff of dry. It's the easiest thing you can do is dry spray it up.
Yeah, I really want to try that on a Holly, because like a small dry shot where you wouldn't even have to mess with the tune.
Yep.
You just let the Holly do its thing would be amazing.
I've done a bunch of dry stuff with the Holly stuff, even as far back as my Colorado. I did the 2 stages on a wet plate. 2 dry stages. Yeah. I've done a lot of the dry nitrous stuff because you can't puddle dry. So nice. I'd like to do one where I have like a 400 or a 500 plate and then have progressive solenoids.
Yeah, they're talking about the 4.8 converters or the 4L80 converters.
Yeah.
It looks like Summit's selling one now that I think it's a Circle D, like a 32 to 3600 stall, based off of probably like Circle D's like budget converter, but probably get one cheaper from Ryan Jans anyways for something like that, and it'll be a lot closer to the combo.
Yep, Jans. Always go for Jans.
Don't have to pay Summit's markup on it.
He has a 3500. Oh, will it actually sit at 3500? I mean, that's not terrible.
It says it's going to 3500 on the converter, but
Yeah.
Probably on a 4.8. Needs more than that.
Yeah. It's just not pumping it air-wise at that point.
Oh, I lost my mic.
Oh, man. I'm actually getting tired and I have a headache. I don't know how long you guys want to go. We're at 3 hours, though. Wow. Surprise guest. Dario, is the Malibu still alive? Well, you said the guy ejected it, but maybe rebuilt it, last you heard. You okay over there? Did he break his headset? Did you break your headset? Uh-oh. Oh. What was that? What was that? Let me see if he's online still. He just ousted. Well, that's it, guys. Thanks. I just sent him a message to see what he says. Oh. Oh, he lost connection? Oh, interesting. Maybe his computer locked up or something, because we had him till he hung up. Yeah, he couldn't, his microphone wasn't working. So he's probably grabbing another. I think that's what he means. The connection for the mic wasn't working. Because he had the interwebs. Oh, I was probably too busy talking. Yeah, or if... Ta-da! Welcome back. You there? Hello?
Is it working?
I hear you.
You can hear me?
Yep.
I can't hear anything, but
Oh.
I'll figure that out. I don't know if it's working.
I hear you.
I can't hear you.
Boost enrichment sometimes does not work, in my opinion. Maybe someone else can chime in.
I got it.
He's back.
I don't know what happened there. I plugged in my phone to charge it next to it because I was watching the feed, and then it just died. Stupid Apple products.
Oh, it probably switched all your audio in and out.
Yeah, I probably thought I was talking on the phone, but I got it handled now. There we go.
Someone asked, do you do a lot of HP Tuner stuff? Oh, yeah, I think
you
do. Because
I do.
The Super Cheapskates car was on HP Tuners.
Yeah, that's what originally I cut my teeth on, was the HP Tuners on that car. I kind of just jumped in head first right into 3-bar speed density and learned from there, kind of thing.
The MX Mang here says, Matt, does HPT boost enrichment work pretty reliably? I can't get it to kick in. And I said sometimes it's slow or doesn't work that great.
Yeah, I pretty much just rely on the PV part of it and tune it, make sure that's all good, and then just make sure your VE cable's where it needs to be. don't rely on the boost enrichment table.
Yeah, he's funny. He's like PE 1.3. It is. Yeah, sometimes I've had some that are pretty decent, and then sometimes they work better at higher pressure, like when it's too close. But so I'll have some cars that I lean on it a little, like a 118 down low, and then over 10, 14 pounds. But you have to hit it like 7 times and make sure it transitions well
Yeah.
when it comes up there. And if it doesn't, you just quit. All those operating systems are totally different. That's a pain in the ass stock computer thing.
Yeah, well, like I do a lot of boosted like E38 and E67 stuff. That's like swap cars, and it is brutal.
Yeah, E38.
It is just so brutal. Like it's not like those ECUs like in the 2 bar speed density tune on E38s. They don't react properly to like injector data. They don't like they're just brutal. Like people complain about all kinds of stuff that they don't do what they or like the throttle shutting and freaking out because the TAC module inside the computer doesn't like boost because it's pushing the throttle blade closed as soon as you lift and it goes into limp mode, and it's just like, man, put a fucking ollie on this thing.
Especially with the integration, yeah, like it's just you try to tell people that stuff and they're so afraid to spend $1,000 to alleviate all their headaches and have a safety net and have upgradability, and it's I always laugh because Cameron talks about this too. People will spend $10,000 on a short block, blink of an eye, from a guy they don't know, and it's probably gonna have oil pressure issues, but they won't spend more than $1,000 on a tranny, and they won't spend $1,000 on a Holly Terminator.
Yeah.
And even then, the price point for like almost a nearly loaded Dominator setup's like $3,000.
Yeah.
And you could have a stock bottom end car with a $3,000 ECU work obviously way better than, trying to make an E40 and an E38 do anything you want to do on a given day.
Yeah, and do it consistently.
Yes, Holly won't work with a 6L80E, you're right. But you could integrate a car and keep the stock sensors on and it still would. But then you need both. But some E38s aren't as bad. You know what I learned? I used to do the speed density conversion. I stopped now and I just fail the meter and rescale the... You can go into virtual VE and other stuff and rescale the entire... So you do speed density, but not speed density. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's how my dually was. So my dually, because they have the speed density tables all the way up to like 250 or 280 kPa.
Yeah.
I just failed the math and then just relied on those tables
Yep.
and put a 3-bar map in it, and I tuned it that way because that operating system with HP tuners on an E38 didn't have 2-bar available. It didn't have any speed density available. So that's just how I did it, and it worked fine. Because I tried doing it math first, because everybody said that's the way to do it. Failed the map sensor and then just do it math, but I maxed that out at like 10 pounds of boost, and then I was just riding the last lines of the cell.
Oh, I tried to talk about this before too. This guy says he's doing an integrated E38 just to keep the TAC working. And I keep bringing up my buddy Michael Page here. I hate throwing him under the bus, but he is so good with the Holly versus CAN bus conversion stuff for the BMWs. I'm like, you already know all those PIDs. I said, honestly, if you took the Holly CAN bus data and spit it out as E38 data that just put out like the stuff the 6L80E needs on the CAN stream,
yeah,
it would work.
TPS, RPM.
Because it has its own ECU. So if you power it, ground it, and give it CAN high and low, I'm like, I would bet it takes less than 10 PIDs for the 6L80E to shift right.
Oh, for sure.
So I'm like, and then people were trying to figure out like the torque amount. So I was saying to him, we should make a custom table that outputs like 600 foot-pounds. So then if your car doesn't make 600, or you can scale, and then we were going to use fuel flow versus whatever to... Because you could lock it out and say the fuel flow number is the foot-pounds level to shift the car. Yeah. But I'm like, you could also make it a scalable output for people not making as much power. And then I nag him about it like once a week. I'm like, just do it. You'll be a millionaire. Because then you could put a 6L in any Holly car. I'm like, just make the converter. Just make it and sell it for like $600. It'll probably cost him like a week in research and $100 a box, and he can sell them for $500 profit. Or if he makes that, he could hand it to Holly and they could buy him out.
For sure.
Because, I mean, he did it before them. Someone just needs to do it, damn it. I'm getting tired of it. Oh, man. Oh, I'm getting a nice wicked headache here. Are we good, everybody? I'm going to quit early this time. I'm bitching out. I don't know why, but it's coming in. All right, well, anybody else have any closing questions? I'd $2 for Dario's birdcage as long as he signs it for me.
The one in the background.
People will talk about it every now and then.
This is my daughter's old room, but we turned it into my office. I haven't redecorated yet.
I downloaded Cameron's tune from the cabinet just for startup. Yeah, you might have to copy the tables. You might be able to open his tune in the compare thing and copy most over, because he had a Dominator and this guy is an HP, but you should be able to copy over relevant tables.
Holly is usually pretty close. HP tuners, it's not as close when you're copying somebody else's tune, I've noticed. Like, if you take one tune from the same combo and you put it in the same ECU in a different car, and it's 10% off. Like, it's crazy how much the same thing can be so different, but that's just HP tuners. Right? So.
Yeah, they'll let you. I've done it where I've loaded some stuff into the compare that was totally different, but it's all the same software. So if you have the trans table available on both, you can copy it over because you can view it.
Yeah, I try to explain that to people sometimes, but it doesn't usually work.
It doesn't have that cross-compatibility issues. But
well, yeah. That, and even if you're way off on a Holly tune, the O2 is just going to take over and do its thing anyways, and you're going to be fine.
Just drive it to the dyno anyway.
Yeah.
All right, well, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, for sure.
And
anytime.
Thanks everybody for joining in, and see you next time. I'll try to announce earlier, and hopefully no flights get canceled. Poor Chris is stuck in like limbo and some airport hell stuff now. I feel bad. I don't want anybody to experience that. All right, see you later. Thanks for coming on. Everybody, bye.